Hey, hi, it's Jim Dingman. Hello.
How you doing, Kenny? What's happening?
Okay, got a very interesting news for you.
What happened?
I'll pull it up. I made three shorts so far from David Graham.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, and
what happened?
so the main thing was, one second, I put the main thing up on August 12th, and it
Right.
has so far 62 hits.
So nobody.
Wait a second. On the shorts, three shorts, got 220, 639 on the one I just put up today.
Yeah, well, that shows you people. I mean, it's interesting how this all works because the other thing I'm noticing is because I've been trolling Fox News deliberately, I've been getting 2 to 3 thousand more Facebook friends in the space of about 3 or 4 months. And I'm just trying to understand how these chat things work in terms of marketing. I haven't put any links up to what we're doing yet because, I don't, who knows what kind of crazy shit will happen. But, it doesn't surprise me about, people's attention span is very limited these days. I mean, they just will only listen to all those TikTok videos do very
Well,
well. I mean, it's just, the funny thing about this all is I'm hoping I'm right now signing up for classes at Columbia, and I'm going to probably, if I find somebody teaching something about internet marketing, I'm going to go straight to that fucking class. I want to hear what the fuck that kind of class is talking about because this is all actually he got a lot of I didn't also see an issue with when he came out with that book. If you go to other websites, he got literally thousands of people listening to them. Now, the reason he has, like, for example, some of the websites he was on when the book came out, these guys already have like built-in audiences of about half million people. So we don't have anything like that at this point. We have nothing like that. So it's just interesting to see how these things get play and don't get play.
one of the interesting, because you mentioned Elon Musk, I put that in the title,
Right.
and that's the one that went right up to 600.
Interesting. Well, you know what I'll do? I'll sit
I
and
have
just
to do a
go.
little stuff myself to see how I
Well,
get the tags.
yeah, yeah, the
Call them
tagging, the
hashtags, hashtags.
tagging, the tagging seems to be the most important thing because whenever I would talk to people and the other thing is I mentioned to your wife, I was talking to one of the guys who I used to work with in the TV operation. He and another person are the main people doing films they're running Gary Knowles' film operation here in New York. And I asked Roland, I said, look, like it'd be interesting. I mean, he knows damn well. He said, Jim, what are you trying to do? Help me, entice me to do this stuff. I said, yeah, of course I am. You know that. But he's done documentary films on the Middle East, which are pretty interesting to look at. But, you know, I know that there's a lot of help out there to look for. It just is, I haven't really concentrated on getting it yet. But, it's just a very interesting thing to figure out.
Yeah.
Pacifica is essentially dead in the water. They really are. They're not growing. I mean, I was looking at the metrics about a week ago. Forget it. It's like I don't know what the hell they think they're going to do if Trump decides to clobber them and pull a signal license, which could happen because the guy who's in charge of the FCC is sending out. He's doing 300 audits around the United States of stations with licenses, and he's looking for any quote violations of DEI, like that, all that crazy, like their definition of that. And like, with Pacifica, forget about it. They could go bananas with something like Pacifica on DEI. That's like the poster child for, the most absurd ideas about DEI. Anyway, but that's interesting. So what was the selection you were going to put up that's small?
Pardon me?
You said you're going to put up another one today that was
No,
three.
I put one up today.
Oh, okay.
They're a lot easier to develop. I'm trying to smooth it out so I can do this shorts faster.
All right.
So they're 3 minutes long.
All right, I'm
No,
gonna.
I pick a guy, whatever, I try to keep it on one topic.
All right,
So the last one was about civil rights, where he's talking about, well, there was a mention of Elon Musk and then
right,
FTC and the
right.
FFC and so forth. I mean, the FCC and the FTC. So, whatever he's talking about is like more or less one thing. And then you just keep putting up the shorts. And I guess I used to be able to tag to the main movie, but I don't know, they're changing their interface or something.
Hmm.
But still not getting any comments. So it could also be like an automatic program that's fishing for new content.
Hmm.
Like a spider that's looking for material.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the whole thing. You gotta when you're putting in stuff in the description, I think you have to repeat a couple of times what it's about for the Google search engines to activate it. I mean, I remember I was taught that years ago when I was learning how to write HTML. There's a whole thing about, you got to sort of repeat it a couple of times because the search engines look for that. But anyway,
Yeah, the secrets of the search engine.
yeah. How you doing, Julian?
Hey Jim, have you seen South Park?
Of course I have. I'm,
Yeah, I was sort of offended because at my age, I sort of look like naked Donald Trump. So, it was a dig at all old people basically.
oh,
I
I
thought he looked pretty good. I mean, if that was, the depiction of Donald Trump, I'd be pretty happy. The guy has nice skin. He obviously uses oil of Olay or whatever.
Well, he's sleeping with a oversized Satan. I mean, the last time they did that was Saddam Hussein. I mean, that's
Yeah,
the
sorry.
whole thing. They did it when they had Saddam Hussein sleeping with Satan when they were satirizing Saddam Hussein years ago.
Yeah, sorry. Did you I guess you know of Nick Fuentes, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's all over TikTok. He's quite, I use TikTok for my news, um, as well as breakpoints. And I mean, this kid's got he's definitely got a lot of popularity in younger males. He,
Fuentes is the one who rebelled against Trump recently. He told Trump to go fuck himself, right?
well, I think in general, MAGA has been shifting against support for Israel. I think, I mean, I'm trying to figure out what it is because a lot of these people, when they're younger, are actually more radical.
Hmm.
And when they learn how to speak well, they get sponsored, and they shift. They shift to the center from the far right to the not so far right, but still on the right. But I'm just speaking to his to the number of viewers they have. Comparing, for example,
Oh, yeah.
Breakpoints to CNN. Have you seen Breakpoints?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, I mean, I'd recommend it. It's a very peculiar mix of conservatives and I guess sort of mainstream left Democrats, and they have this show where they don't agree on subjects. But I mean, It's the guy that's running it is a guy called Sagar, who
Uh-huh.
is an American Indian who he studied at Herzliya in Israel, counterterrorism.
Really?
He's not supportive of Israel.
Hmm.
You have a guy called Grimm, who's a journalist.
Hmm.
So I mean, I check it out. It's on YouTube. I have it. I mean, I basically have it in the background because their demographic is the under 35s, of
Hmm.
which they have, I think, a double-digit percentage. So they're a remarkably effective operation for
Called
the.
Breakpoint.
Say again?
Breakpoint?
Yeah,
It's a YouTube channel. It's a TikTok channel.
YouTube. I think they're on TikTok as well, but YouTube is where I get them. Sorry, they're called Breaking Points. Breaking
Oh,
Points.
Breaking Point. Breaking Point. Have you ever heard of that, Kenny?
No, I don't know. I don't know. But it sounds good. I'll check it out myself.
Well,
Absolutely.
I gotta say, I'm impressed because they got people with
Okay,
different
I see it. I
beliefs.
see it. Breaking Points.
Yeah,
Breaking Points. Okay.
it's got me. Check out their demographic. It's pretty. I mean, sorry, their portion of the viewership. They're definitely doing something right. They were making fun of MSNBC's new rebranded group, and I think they have the second largest viewership. But you know, because they're corporate owned, there's no guarantee that you're not going to get intervention from high above. But in their first, well, not their first episode, but in I think their episode yesterday, they were branding themselves as an insurgent news organization, which they are
Holy
not.
shit.
Which they're not.
Wow, 1.6 million subscribers. Wow.
Yeah. So I would
All
frankly
right, I'll
open
check
a
it
YouTube
out.
channel, Jim,
I'll check it out. Yeah.
and get some right. Well, actually, you have the perfect formula. You got a bunch of left wing and right wing people, and
Yeah.
you barely are keeping them from hitting each other.
That's right.
You have the. I think Breaking Point's probably stole your format.
No, no, no. Well, yeah, that's true. Well, that's been from the start because I think about a year ago, Tom mentioned that. I think, he was sort of laughing when I was navigating between all these different people. But
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, I think it's better to have that kind of mixture, even though it gets a little crazy at times. I mean, last week, Michael got pissed off at Alex, and Alex slammed the phone down and left. But anyway,
He got
But
pissed off at who? Michael?
yeah, he got pissed off. Well, they fight all the time. They fight like cats and dogs. They always fight and argue. They go to the diner and fight and argue. I mean, it's just like been going on for years. You know.
what's the problem with the formula? I mean, the mainstream news organizations basically knuckle down on just focusing on a particular demographic of a
Right.
particular political inclination. The
Right.
the sort of McLaughlin group kind of people yelling at each other format
Oh yeah.
doesn't typically survive.
No, that's fun. It's funny. The McLaughlin. I actually went on the McLaughlin group during the Gulf War,
Oh,
and
cool.
it was very funny because McLaughlin. I told him, I said, look, I don't want to start screaming and yelling at you, man. When I went, because he was filming it down in Maryland. But you
Well,
know, it was like McLaughlin was sort of amusing because the guy was a very bright guy. There's no doubt about it. But it was sort of this like, you know, and he was well prepared. I mean, it was like a crazy week in review type of show. Um, but it's sort of like, I've been sort of looking at how I've looked at these week in review shows like PBS does, or that's what one thing we were going to do at BAI was because of the change in the management there, I was going to be assigned a 2-hour slot on Sundays. Then the guys that I was working with just got fired about 5 or 6 months ago, so that ended that. But
that's
then
too
I
bad.
then I could have had a lot of fun because I would have been, in the middle of the afternoon on a Sunday. I could have done whatever the hell I wanted to, and that was the objective. Kenny, you're going to put something up? Okay.
I was just going to bring up the breaking point.
Yeah, I'll go check it out, man. Thank you for hipping me to it because I'd like to see what it has to say. Um,
Trying to show it anyhow. I'll try once again.
and we'll have to
I
we'll have
gotta
to
say, it's amazing.
publicize more what Chris is doing because Jamie was interesting to hear him talk about. You would have enjoyed Alex and Tom. You would have enjoyed this. Maybe you would have too. Ken was a sophisticated discussion on the Antietam campaign of 1862, and we started to argue about General McClellan, which is always a sore point, depending on your point of view.
Here's the breaking point website,
Oh, okay. All
YouTube
right.
channel. And look at the topics. Trump slams new steel tariffs, may cripple U.S. steel industry. Ben Gvir taunts Palestinian. Let's see if I can make it.
He went to Marwan Barghouti. He went to one of the major Palestinian leaders who's in prison, and he was basically telling them, like, if you guys think we're going to surrender, forget about it. And then Mearsheimer and Tucker Carlson. Well, that's always amusing. Um,
Mersheimer
Not
breaking
only that,
down.
Jim, because Marwan Barghouti has basically been starved and tortured for the past 2
oh,
years.
really? Okay, that's
Yeah. Oh no, that
important to know.
again,
Yeah.
like a lot of Palestinians. So
Right.
again, whatever reaction he had, the guy was, I mean, you
Yeah.
could see apparently in the video that he's not in his right mind. But yeah, so they basically, taunting a torture victim. So great guy.
Right. Yeah. No, Gavir is a piece of shit. Cuomo prays for Trump. Right. Oh yeah. Now Cuomo's interesting. Now this is sort of interesting. Cuomo uh has actually, oh no, I'm not talking to Trump, and now he's essentially shifted gears on all this. He's actually talking about how he's hoping that Trump will come in and intervene
Yeah,
and force Curtis Lewa out of the mayoral race, which I found
and
interesting.
Adams, because the other guy,
Adams,
Tim, how would he do that?
well,
it
I'm
just
just
get
well,
with you. Look,
yeah, go
everybody's
on,
got a
Kenny.
price. Everybody's got a price, right?
Well, I
Oh,
understand some
no,
now.
but I would think Stila, he would tell, Trump to go F himself.
Yeah,
Oh, wait a
exactly.
second.
Yeah.
Wait a second.
Lewa would.
Here, he could do a Trump trick like this. He said, "Look, okay, Cuomo, make a deal with Eric Adams, and with Lu- uh,
Curtis Lewa.
Curtis
Yeah.
Leeway, and say, if I get elected, I'll make you in charge of you'll be the chief of
Yeah.
police, and
Yeah.
you'll be this,
Yeah.
like he did with RFK and
Yeah,
Gabby,
you're right. You're right, Kenny.
They,
That's a
I think
possibility.
they all have too big egos.
because the other guy only has
Exactly.
42%,
Well,
or
he
44,
has
42 to 44. So that
that's
means the rest, everybody else, is the
right.
three, mostly Cuomo, Eric Adams, and Curtis Leeway.
But Ken, as you know, again, this is all based on the likely voter, and the primary show again. Mamdani brought in a lot of new voters who probably don't get counted in those polls. So his probably real
Oh,
numbers are probably considerably higher if you
but I
Or
understand.
lower.
when the vote whenever the vote happens.
They're
I mean,
possibly
you've done
higher,
you've
but
done election stuff, Ken. So
possibly
yeah.
lower. Possibly lower,
Well,
because he didn't bring up, when he ran in that primary, he had the support of the people that support him, his backers. But there was no organization of people who were opposed to him. Now he's building up, yes, he may be
yeah,
building
yeah.
up
You're
some
right.
more
You're right.
support, but he's also building up an opposition.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Sure,
But I
he's got plenty of
understand.
money, I'm
All
sure.
the
Well,
Jews, the
yeah.
Jews
Well,
may
no,
come out.
not all the Jews. I mean, come on. Like Gail. Well, look, I understand. And Alex, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Gail just yelled at me about an hour ago that some of Adams' campaign people were just indicted.
Yeah,
Real,
so what?
okay, I can. Well,
It's New
Okay,
York.
yeah. I mean, like recently invited, or I thought.
no, indicted,
Oh, indicted by
indicted
who? The
by some. Wait, hold on.
let me look this up. It should be in the Times then.
But could I just mention that one of the big the points today raised by Breaking Points was that Levitt didn't deny that the U.S. was planning military operations against Venezuela, and there's a ridiculously high value get Maduro thing from the State Department. So
Yeah, they're invading. They're sending troops down to Venezuela.
Yeah, that's just what we need. Another stupid war.
yeah, so I think Rubio finally, I mean the Cuban Americans finally have
Look,
their
I don't remember the exact numbers, but Venezuela has a pretty large, militia for, and they're not gonna. Also, it has a bunch of jungle. I mean, you know, I mean, well, we know what happened in Nicaragua with how great the Contras did. But you could, yeah, basically be, Vietnam and Latin America. I mean,
Alex,
Maduro's not
Alex,
gonna just lay down in his people.
Alex, we should look at a map and see where the population is. I think it's
All
mostly
right.
coastal. And they have 4 million militia apparently.
All
I
right.
mean, the Russians could do some well, they
All right, let me
probably
get back. Let me get back to the Adams thing. So actually, yes, indeed, Ingrid Lewis Martin, who is an ally of Adams, she's a former City Hall aide. She is now being arraigned on charges for, let's see. Oh yeah, two other people are reported to also be indicted. Gina and Tony Argento, who own Broadway stages and had previously donated to the Adams campaign. So that's interesting. So the DA Bragg is going
Jim, I'm
after.
seeing
Oh,
Jesse
Bragg,
Pinkman.
that's the famous one who went, cooperated with, went after Trump on 3 or 4 charges.
Okay, yeah, they're expected, according to
correct.
the Times, they're expected to
I
surrender
think he's
to
totally
the authorities
corrupt, you know.
tomorrow morning and be arraigned. So,
He says these are these little, they got their fiefdom and says, hey, I'm important. Watch what I can do. I can shoot elephants and tigers and giraffes. I can go after anybody. So he must have some kind of a
yeah.
disagreement going with
And
Eric
this
Adams.
is fun here. The Times quotes the mayor's spokesperson saying Mayor Adams was not involved in this matter and has not been accused or implicated in any wrongdoing. He
Right.
remains focused on his priority of serving 8.5 million New Yorkers who call this city home. And then Ingrid Lewis Martin no longer works for this administration. So,
Well, most of the guys are getting called in front of the judge these days for real estate false reporting on their tenancy, or where they're living and how many units they own and different things like that to manipulate the mortgage amounts. Like what's his name? Adam Schiff is getting that. Is that his name? Adam Schiff. Schiff.
yeah, your senator.
Not mine. Not mine.
No, oh, you didn't vote. Maybe you didn't vote for him, but he's your senator in California.
Yeah, he's one of the senators.
You're his constituent.
Not much worse than Feinstein or Barbara Boxer was cute. Feinstein was kind of like morbid. No, she was. She was cute. We used to have a governor that was dating Linda Ronstadt, Jerry Brown. At
Well,
one
again, not for the crazy Twinkie guy. She probably never would have gotten there because her whole career is owed to the assassination of Harvey Milk, and I forget George Moscone, as that's how she became. She was like deputy mayor of San Francisco. She became
Who's that? Who are you talking
that
about?
launched her whole political career. She was first time.
You're talking about Harris?
No, Feinstein. That's how she moved up. Probably
Kamala?
she would have probably without that she would have remained some obscure politician that nobody ever heard of.
Don't make any critical remarks about her. She could have been running a very good
All right,
Google,
well-
guru retreat, meditation, and
Well,
the absence of the past, the evaporation of the past gives us the future that we move into.
All right. So here is the latest polling data. So
Yeah.
Mamdani has 41.8% of the support. Now that's down.
Jim, can you put that up?
Yeah, share it.
Well, okay. Can I share it?
Yeah, why not?
All right, fine. Let me just see.
We have an open share policy here. Now, don't somebody start mooning us, please. There you
All
go.
right, here you go. So here is the this is the
Get rid of that football picture. We don't need that.
yeah, right. Actually,
So what does it say?
let me just
Oh yeah, there it is. Cuomo 23%.
Flea was 16.5. Adams has come down in support. 7.9% undecided. They're obviously being targeted. 1.6% support other candidates. And Mamdani has 41.8. Now they're saying here if Cuomo drops out, okay, so basically what they're saying is that you're probably right, Kenny. You'd have to have two of these guys dropping out for it really to make a change. But they're arguing here, if everyone but Cuomo drops out, Mamdani leads by 11 points.
Yeah.
So here's where President Trump most likely will open his big fat trap and interfere in the election process in New York City.
And
Because
probably help
I can't see them pulling before the election a PR stunt like they're doing in Washington right now. That first of all, they need to send a lot more troops than 3,000 or 4,000 National Guardsmen. Forget about it. They're gonna have to send like a goddamn division, and at least. But I can't see him doing that because if he does that, that'll just simply piss off a lot of New Yorkers, and they'll just want to vote for Mamdani. I think that'll just backfire right in his face.
Yeah.
And then
Jim,
and
where?
Curtis.
Okay, there's.
Here's Curtis. Now Curtis, I look. I've met Curtis. I like Curtis. He is a down to earth New Yorker. I can't agree with him politically about anything, but I personally like him. But I've never ever felt that I wanted to see him mayor. And then he's not somebody who respects Trump too much. I mean, he's told Trump to go fuck himself in the past. So I don't see Sliwa as being some sort of, he's not going to go tiptoe off the election site here. And with Cuomo and Adams, you got two big egomaniacs. They're not going to leave. I mean, it's going to be, I mean, I could be wrong. Admittedly, I could be wrong. Now, Adams, of course, still has this whole question of the plea bargain he did with Trump. And of course, they're bringing up all the unfavorable stuff from Mamdani. Fox News every day is going nuts with him, like, going back and forth.
Okay, wait a minute. You just brought something very important right down here. Adams is 83% favorable and 49% unfavorable.
8.3%.
Bandami is 36% favorable and 42% unfavorable.
Right. No, it's 8.3% favorable
Yeah.
for Adams.
Yeah. But here's this is the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Here's the people who didn't come out in the primary, 42% unfavorable.
Right. Right. Well, that's
I
who they're trying to get. That's who they're trying to mobilize to come out and vote. And the question is, that's where, I don't know how they're arguing about this at the presidential level or at the GOP level. Because the GOP stuck with Curtis Leo. Now, the Republican Party in New York City these days, I mean, look, Alex and I know people who used to be MoveOn.org activists who are now active in the Republican Party of New York. I mean, like I will not name names on the phone, but I know people who actually have run for elected office in the Republican Party. So, that's not necessarily, it's not like you're down there in Florida or something like that. You're not down there in a red state where you got real rock bottom, solid, deeply rooted Republicanism in New York City. Staten Island different. Staten Island different. But but anyway, those are the numbers.
Hey, listen, let's move on to something a little bit more substantial than who cares? It's just New York City. But anyhow, Alex brought up a very interesting article
But
about Ukraine, the history between Ukraine and Russia. And I've listened to a very interesting podcast about it. I didn't know anything about this maiden revolution in 2004.
Maidan Revolution.
Maidan.
Maidan, yeah,
Just
all
the
of that
square
background.
building, yeah.
Who's doing what? And what did what's the real history behind it all? Because what's happened is, let's say you're a novice. Let's say you came from another planet. What is the conflict we have with USSR? Russia cooperated with the Allies. We beat the Germans, right? Then there was stuff, and maybe we fought against them. No, the Korean War was backed by the Chinese, not the Russians, right?
oh no, the Russians were totally backing the North Koreans. That army was equipped. They were told there was like Stalin's last hurrah was the Korean War.
Okay. So, all right, that's fine. But, fight fair and don't kill the POWs. There's conflicts you got to make up. You get in an argument with your brother. Why is there a supposed antagonism about Russia being the big enemy? If you think that that's, infiltration into the U.S. politics and culture to try to wimp us out, well, that could be the Chinese. It's not necessarily the Russians. Why can't we be allies with the Russians? In fact, somebody here said once somebody was going to make an offer to Russia to join NATO at some point. I don't know when. But, so it's this fabricated thing of trying to control domestic politics by getting involved in international conflicts. And that's the way you get support. The Bushes did that. We're going to war with Saddam Hussein. You got to vote for me. You don't want some weak, fishy guy like Joe Biden in charge of the country when you get into a war. You want some maniac like Trump or Bush or somebody, nasty guy, or at least Hillary Clinton. Somebody who's going to be like, oh, let me talk about I was a lifeguard and the kids sat in my lap. You don't want that.
Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was a lifeguard.
Who?
followed Reagan.
Yeah. I know, but he was also a cowboy in the movies, right? Hey, the major thing they keep playing on YouTube with Reagan is he told a lot of jokes in front of a podium. He'd give these stories, very similar to the guy who used to do the rest of the story. Just to tell a story, three guys and this and that, and then the punchline is one guy. It's good. But anyhow, that's blah, blah, blah. I'm just saying, what is the real root basis of
All right.
the Democrats, it seems, saying we have to support Ukraine because that's our
All right.
parity. They're working for us
All right.
to.
Why don't I throw that to Julian? Julian, why don't you take a
Well,
shot?
but the thing is, Alex brought the article up, so he should present it because there's two things. There's indications that the CIA in 1957 was trying to get
No,
Ukraine.
this is declassified. Yeah, it's this crazy plan they had to put special forces into Ukraine in 1957. It's just but it's interesting
Not
because again,
crazy. No, no, no. Oh,
interesting
oh,
thing
all
is
right.
the same divisions they talk about last then is who was really pro-Soviet, and they point to the Crimea and the Donbass as being very loyal, which of course is still the
Well,
truth. Yeah.
well, I'm sort of curious. Tom was a special forces officer. I
Oh yeah.
mean, yeah. I mean, look. The issue of fighting against.
Well,
Remember, after
I
World War
think they have
Two,
a
and
link to.
after World War Two, when they set up when they set up the special forces in Europe, they're oriented to fight a war against the Soviet Union. Those guys are trained to organize guerrilla armies in the Warsaw Pact and in the Soviet Union. And there was that study that you cite. Maybe Alex, you should pull that up so you could
I'll
show
pull it
people
up.
what it is. But that doesn't surprise me. I have a feeling there were a lot of studies done about of
Sure.
Warsaw Pact countries. They were trying to figure out how they would be able to conduct a partisan war if a world war broke out.
Right.
And
And
that
again,
was
we know
the
that's part of
aftermath. And so, sort of answering Kenny's question, so there's a whole question of Ukrainian nationalism that is very controversial, that has in it revanchist and Nazi sympathies, sort of what happened in in Ukraine
I
in
got it. Yeah.
interwar period and in the war itself, particularly in the western part of Ukraine when the Germans invade. Stefan Bandera and these ultra right, frankly xenophobic Ukrainians rise and then kill all the Poles in that area, and actually are doing that before the Germans come into Lviv. But Julian, what I mean, you have an opinion about this whole how the causality of this occurs. How do you see the causality of this situation in Ukraine happening?
No, I'd like to share it, but I'd first like to get Alex's point,
Okay, all right.
and then I'll happily share because I think Alex is he keeps
Yeah, Alex, go
advising
ahead,
me.
Alex.
Oh,
I pulled it up here.
but I
This is
think
the
within
article.
there, I think there's a link to the actual original paper. I mean, which is the classified.
Down. It's
Okay,
further.
I'll
That
close
has
that.
the map. The
Go ahead.
Alex,
You
it's
go.
further down. It's further
Because that'll
down.
tell you what they thought they were going to do.
Well, all
Again,
right.
I think it's mostly like sabotage. Yeah.
Well, no, they were analyzing it as a target, how they were going to actually affect a guerrilla war. And so that doesn't surprise me. That was being done all throughout the Warsaw Pact. I mean, remember, that was one of the, again, the crisis in 1956 in Hungary. Yeah, you got to go further down. You got to go further down. It'll say 1957, and then you can actually link it. It's up,
Let me search for 1950.
further up. No. It's on. It's a
Go,
link. The link
go
is
up.
on right there. August 57. That's it. You have to
I
hit
click on
August,
this.
August. Yeah, yeah. I think
that
that's
link. That link will bring up the study. There you go.
yeah.
And that indicates, and see, look, it's done by Georgetown. That was a whole project going on that eventually broadened itself out to study all the different parts of the world. I mean, that's not a big mystery. This is just what they did in
Yeah.
looking at Ukraine.
I mean,
But
and
yeah,
the interesting thing again is the parallels to who was kind of pro-Soviet back then, who was pro-Russian now.
But weren't okay. So here I am, the novice. Wasn't Ukraine
Kenny,
aligned
I
with
think you
the
might want to
Axis?
zoom in a little bit because it's hard to see at this scale. Yeah, yeah, a little bit out of it, and then yeah.
What wasn't Ukraine aligned with the Axis during World War II?
Well, they had collaboration forces, like yeah, like a lot of the Soviet Union. Again, they're collaborators, and well, people who participated in the Holocaust in Belarusia and the Baltic states. I mean, um, not to mention like a lot of the Eastern European allies of Germany, like the Romanians, actually, did their own atrocities. And in some cases, were according to the Germans, were worse than than them.
Yeah, yeah. Polish
But
was much worse, and
Right.
yeah,
the
and
Germans,
Ukrainian.
the Germans set up a nation state in the midst of the aftermath of defeating and forcing the czarist.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they set it up. It's partially a result of the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in 1918. What's the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk? It's 1917 or 1918? 1918, right? You
Yeah,
guys,
yeah.
Jillian? Yeah, okay.
Well, technically, it's in 1919.
Here, I'm going to read this because
1918. 1918.
it's
But
right here. Is the fourth root of the Ukrainian nationalism grew out of the sharp cleavage which existed between the eastern industrial and urban parts of Ukraine and the western, what does it say? The western
Rural
rural district. Traditionally, the Ukrainian
people.
regarded merchants and city dwellers with suspicion. So this is what they were working on. So, and so that's what they're talking about. So going back prior to the end of World War II, what was the U.S. Army? Maybe Thomas knows. What was the U.S. Army's viewpoint about Ukraine?
what, before
I
World
don't know.
War II?
I didn't.
Before World War II?
At that time, I wasn't old enough to talk to anybody about it.
Oh,
You know. Yeah.
I'm just going back to World War II, not
Yeah.
World War One.
No, no,
Thanks.
And
Thanks a
Tom
lot.
would have, unless Tom would have been in one of those units that would have done this,
well,
he would have.
well, look, the Soviet Union, we were backing the Soviet Union as an ally.
Right.
Most of the Ukrainians fought and were allied. I mean, here's a get controversial issues. Uh, the question of, remember they'd had the forced famine that occurred in the
Yeah.
1930s when there was a forced industrialization, which alienated tremendously the Ukrainians. That was one of the aspects of Stalinization. I think that was in the first 5-year plan. Julian and
I
Alex
think
can correct me on that. Is that
that's in the 30s, so I think that's a little bit
it was
later.
the first 5-year
That,
plan, was it not, Julian and Alex?
no.
I
Julian,
don't
are you?
think it was. I don't think it
I
was
thought it
early.
started in like 1930. So
Well, no,
Yeah, I
it
agree with
starts
Alex.
in the late 20s into the 30s, but whatever it was certainly during that period of
yeah,
time.
yeah,
And
yeah.
then the second,
It's
so
collectivization.
yeah, collectivization. And so that's where, of course, you had literally hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians starved to death because they were forcibly collecting the produce of the Ukrainians and then using it to purchase and export it abroad to get foreign exchange to essentially develop their defense industries. And so when you talk to stone cold communists, they always defend that Stalinization policy as being essential to win World War II. Again, that's not how a Ukrainian whose family starved to death would necessarily view it. So that happened, and then that laid the basis for the nationalist reaction to the Soviet Union, such as Stefan Bandera. Stefan Bandera is a controversial figure. He's now eulogized like a lot of these guys who were essentially in the time they were rising up as figures, they were fascists, frankly. Stefan Bandera was a fascist, and there were a whole bunch of fascist types in Eastern Europe. Yet they were viewed as uh, militant expressions of nationalism, and especially in the case of Ukraine, against the domination and control by the Soviet Union. And so when the war breaks out, there are indeed Ukrainians who align themselves with the Germans early on and, in fact, become their collaborators. Now, that's not to say that all the Ukrainians were collaborators, because that's historically inaccurate. But then, of course, we have these famous examples of the slaughter of Jews, like what's that famous around Kiev?
Baba
The
Yar,
Baba Yar, all these,
70,
and then
30
you
to
have
70,000
and
killed.
then it becomes a big civil war in the rear area of the Germans. The people
And
under
then
Bandera,
not only Jews, they were slaughtering Poles.
they're fighting against the Poles. The Poles are fighting against them. There's a very good film that was done about this. Maybe
By Oliver Stone.
no,
No.
no. It was done by a
No,
Polish film director. But what it shows is
Oh,
essentially
probably well,
the
why check,
ethnic.
Jim?
Yeah,
I
was
didn't
it by
check
checks?
that.
It was a film about the ethnic divisions in Western Ukraine, close to the Polish border between Poles and Ukrainians who grew up together. And then they're basically the Poles are being slaughtered by the Ukrainians. So that kind of stuff spills over into the period after the war. And then what the Maidan, now here we get into a controversial issue. What's the Maidan revolt? Because when the Soviet Union collapsed, there's all these different nationalist tendencies that come up and, are at odds with each other. Ukraine, for example, I think Ukraine had the third largest amount of nuclear weapons in the world. Is that not correct? In,
Yeah.
in 1992?
Next to
Sort of. I mean,
Kazakhstan, I think.
they
Yeah,
didn't
go on,
command
Jimmy.
the people that had them.
Right, but anyway, but there was this big, that was a big turning point in Ukraine as they were quote be asserting their independence. The question was, should they give these weapons over to the former Soviet Union to be disarmed or not? And that was a big political, and then of course they don't have any way to protect themselves if there's a revanchist Soviet Union, and that was a big issue debated internally inside Ukraine, and eventually, of course, they agreed to do it. So then you get into this whole question of NATO expansion, the question of the NATO enlargement issue. That is, let's turn all these Eastern European states into our allies to contain a revanchist Russia. And that, of course, is where we're at right now. Now, I'm skipping the Maidan rebellion because maybe I'm sure that Alex would have a different explanation than I would, and I'm sort of curious to hear his. And then Julian, of course, would have a different interpretation, I would imagine, too.
So what's your interpretation about the Maiden Revolution, the Maiden Revolution? Jim or
Ask
Sorry,
Alex.
Alex?
Let Alex do
Oh,
that.
one interesting thing, I was going to send this to you, Jim. The Gray Zone, they just had this guy who's come out with a book. He's a retired, he worked for the OSCE in Ukraine all the way through to 2022. And he's written a book about his experience. He's a French guy. Wait, give me a second to find him.
Yeah. Well, well, he's not here. You are.
You just show the video. This video, Aaron Mate interviewed this. He's this guy, Benoit Pare, is wait, let me share it. What's this?
Well, this is where it gets controversial because people will argue. Oh,
But
go
no,
on.
again, he was there from 20 here, yeah.
Isn't that Aaron Mate?
He's there from 2015 through 2022. And one
Binot
of the,
Pare.
I mean, he did give an hour and a half interview based on
All
this
right,
book.
Binot
But
Pare.
one of them, I mean, to summarize, one of the things he said again is, I guess at one point he was asked to do a survey of who was bombing who, and his numbers again, which is based on the data that the OSCE, which is the Office for the Security and something of Europe. It's basically it's defunct now, but basically they were monitoring the fighting. They had cameras all around Ukraine where the fighting between the separatists and the government was happening. So they're recording, and they're cataloging essentially, who's shelling who, where the fighting is. And he said, according to the numbers, this was then 2015, 16, he was asked to compile the numbers. And is what he found out is that over 70% of the attacks were in the separatist area. So it's pretty clear again based on his personal knowledge, and again, what the OSC was, again, that basically the government was hitting the other side, and also getting they actually compiled civilian casualties, which again were about above 70% on the separatist side. And also he comments again, he met various, both Ukrainians and separatists, and his experience was that they had genuine grievances, the separatists, and that his point again, you can watch the interview, it's actually quite interesting. He pretty much says, it's from the perspective of that, the separatists, they didn't actually, at least initially, is actually kind of somewhat similar to we've been talking about, the American Revolution, that, where they still think of themselves as British, like in 1775, a lot of them. And they're kind of, over time, they've become radicalized and want to be independent eventually. So it's kind of a similar, again, and this is, based on people he met in this.
Well, I mean, the key question is, does Russia have a reasonable position to say that the people in the Donbass and Crimea and there's a few other territories are really Russian? They've been there all this time. They only speak Russian, and they want to stay with Russia, and they voted for it, and that should really be reverted to Russia.
That's difficult, because then, I mean, obviously there are people with guns around when they're having these elections. So how much can you say that there isn't a level? Well, there's definitely a level of intimidation, but maybe they would. I mean, you can talk more about, like, again, the election they have in Crimea seems to have, just because again they have polling from before the Russian takeover there.
What's your viewpoint on
that
it?
shows a pretty strong majority of the people of Crimea, wanting, to be part of Russia. And that goes back to basically when Ukraine was formed in 1991, that a lot of them would rather have been, because Crimea is a weird case, because it's basically like Khrushchev, because, when Khrushchev became basically the general secretary of the, Soviet Communist Party of the Soviet Union, during the war, his power base was in the Ukraine. As Jim can tell you, basically he's like the political commissar for the Soviet armies that are fighting some of them that are fighting the Ukraine. So he had this strong personal connection to the Ukraine. So at one point, I forget what exactly year, 50, once he's in charge of 55 or 56, he essentially he attaches the Crimea, which had not been part of Ukraine historically. Again,
Okay,
going back to Catherine the Great, it was part of considered directly part of Russia, because it's an important naval base. They're not gonna. But again, he kind of hands it over to them, and I mean, just with that, again, my thought on that has always been, that there's just no way the Russians were ever going to let, Ukraine hold on to that if they're going to be hostile to them. They're not going to give up the Black Sea Fleet. That's, they would go to nuclear war to make sure that they don't lose Sevastopol. I mean, they lost tens of thousands of lives to defend it and then to retake it during the Second World War. There's simply no way they were, that's like asking, are the Russians going to give up Petrograd, St. Petersburg? It's almost on that level. Or, are they going to give up basically their bases in the Kola Peninsula and all their nuclear subs up there? It's on the same level, I think, there.
Okay, so let's find out if anybody else has a solid position. Should Ukraine back off and let Russia take on those territories that they can demonstrate have really been in their sphere of influence since before there was a Ukraine? And Zelensky saying, no, it's like a civil war or something. You can't. Russia's evil. They're invading us, but no, they don't have a valid point. I think it's a weak case. I think the Russians have the look. Didn't we break the Sudan up like about a year and a half ago? South Sudan, North Sudan. This idea that the borders are imperative,
A few years ago,
sacred. It's
Not
not
to
a sacred thing. You got the same thing going on in Israel and Palestine. Who was there first and all of that stuff. And then you got the same thing going on in California and all the West. You know, they have ceremonies every time they have a public ceremony, even if it's just a jazz band. They say, "Oh, and we want to thank the real owners of this property," and they start naming off Indian tribes.
Well,
We
well,
stole the land from the Indians.
What do we
So,
got?
you know,
look. What was not discussed was the actual Maidan rebellion.
yeah, that's what I
And
want to
that,
know.
and
You
that, and
know
that,
that?
and that, the actual Maidan rebellion, and I know Julian's going to come in with this on this one, supposedly they began demonstrating in November 2013 against the then president Yanukovych, who was decided not to sign a agreement with the EU, and instead chose closer ties to Russia. And there began this big, uh, demonstrations. Now that's where you get into the question of, okay, was the United States involved in what were the people there demonstrating had sincere motivations beyond simply trying to reduce it to simply them being machinated by the evil, desires of the West to initiate a covert operation. And that's always where you get into these little dilemmas because I personally think there were lots of reasons why people wanted to overthrow the Yanukovych, but that's where you get into big debates about this. And then, of course, the situation expanded, and then they, quote, reached a situation where there were clashes, people killed, and then there was a agreement in February of 2014 to set up a unity government. And the next day, on the 22nd, Yanukovych flees to go to Moscow. And here's where you get the thing that Putin bases his justification in intervening, and that is that the vote of the Ukrainian parliament was 328 to 0. About about 75% of them were voting, and that was a vote that Russians said was essentially a coup, that it was engendered by the West, it was illegal, et cetera. But the question then becomes, how do you then evaluate all this opposition that led to Yanukovych being overthrown? And I personally disagree with some who don't think it was legitimate. And then, in the aftermath of that, of Yanukovych fleeing to Moscow, that's when you begin to have the intervention of Russia into the Crimea, and when they annex Crimea, the little green men stuff. But Julian, you please jump in, Julian.
Okay, before I talk about Ukraine, can I just, three separate topics. First, on the stay behind force, the U.S. believed it would be easier to fight the Soviets, not only in Europe, but across the planet, if they had teams that left behind equipment and had an espionage network, and if they liaised with the local intelligence services. And it was based upon the experience of World War II, where they basically had to rely on communists in Greece and union organizers in France to get these resistance movements going. I have secondhand knowledge, having interviewed people in Pakistan about that, where U.S. the equivalent of the CIA and the U.S. Special Forces from the late 40s, early 50s already started training the Pakistani Frontier Corps, the Special Service Group. And so the war that we saw in the 80s with the Soviets invading Afghanistan, the infrastructure was already set up. I mean, it's not like the Pakistanis were surprised, or the Americans for that matter. The Green Berets frequently rotated in and out. And if you go to Carlisle Barracks, there's a whole bunch of periodicals which cover that. So it makes it's not a surprise that the CIA
Julian, you know what the
looking
for
looking at getting involved in Ukraine. Say again, Alex.
You know the code name, because I know in Europe it was Operation Gladio. But I'm just
No, I don't.
No,
remember,
well, Gladio was separate from this. I mean, I don't disagree with you on Gladio, but what Julian's talking about was this was sort of John Foster Dulles and all these guys. They were into the rollback arguments right after NSC 68 and the onset of the Korean War. Go on, Julian.
So I do want to make the point that, yeah, I mean, Alex, I think it's a part of the same program with different code words in different regions, but it was all across the planet. You had these stay behind forces. I want to point to the ugliness. I mean, we think of these stay behind forces as doing things like causing the collapse of the Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact collapsed in in some countries in 48 hours, like Hungary, Czechoslovakia, it just fell over. I don't, and so everyone said, communism was rotten at the core. I don't think you would have communism fall as easily if even if the Soviets weren't backing it in the 50s, because the communist governments did fix a lot of problems. I don't think Hungary or Poland would have industrialized as quickly if you didn't have responsible communist governments. So, I mean, Hungary, I'm familiar with, having visited there. They don't remember that whole growth period. So the communists came in, made everyone go to school, took money from the rich, gave it to the poor, and frankly, I think for 20 years did a lot of good. So communism is not automatically bad. So on the other hand, by the time it got to the late 80s, I mean, everyone was fed up with the Soviets. And the principle in the First World War was that you allow self-determination. It's a great way to avoid war, which is people rule themselves. It doesn't matter what they are. Whatever they think they are should be allowed. The problem with Ukraine is even after the Maidan, like for 5 years after the Maidan, Ukrainians were trying to impose Ukrainian identity. And so,
Right.
I mean, Ukraine's complicated. Western Ukraine is Catholic, and because the Catholic Church wanted to maintain influence through the Habsburgs in that part of the world, they allow Catholic priests in Ukraine to marry. So we're looking at ideological, fight that goes back and forth. I mean, obviously the Catholics in Ukraine are going to, support the West against the East, and so Ukraine right off the bat is divided. There was a Hungarian unit fighting in the Donetsk against the Ukrainians because the Ukrainians had a single language policy where the Hungarians weren't allowed to teach their language. And so this is a problem, obviously, for the Romanians as well. It was a problem for the, what are those poor Mongols that were left in the Crimea? I can't remember what
The Tartars.
Yeah, the Tatars. So the Ukrainians are trying to impose an identity that made no sense. They've come a long way because of Western financial support. They've now allowed Hungarians, for example, to teach in their own language, or at least teach the language in the schools near the Hungarian border. So the Ukrainians were ignoring their own rule of the principle of self-determination, which is what people do. I mean, in North America, obviously, if we gave total democracy, then everything would fall apart. So you have to agree at some point where you're not going to let groups become autonomous and spin away. But I mean, I think it's fairly obvious that the Ukrainians didn't want to be under the control of Russia. I did write an article. I put 3 links there. Unfortunately, the 2 articles that I have there are Real Clear Defense and Hill Times. The Hill Times is behind a stupid paywall. But the first article was written with a Ukrainian national, and the second was written with a Russian national. The Ukrainian national, we were going through the elections, and actually the Russian eastern part of Ukraine was becoming more complicated. It's not clear that they were voting entirely on language issues. And I think that's one of the reasons why Putin invaded, because the younger generation, particularly in the Donetsk and the Luhansk, basically didn't have a Manichaean view of Russian versus the Ukrainian. I mean, I think they had the attitude of, I can travel between both countries, let's chill. I have more in common with young Ukrainians from the West than I do with old people from the East. I think the war has erased all that and hardened it. So, if Ukrainians want to fight, we let them fight, because that's the principle of self-determination. I got to say, they have a lot more guts than I think the Taiwanese are going to show if they get attacked. But I mean, from the principle of our Western values, we have to support people when they don't want to be occupied by outsiders. But on the other hand, Ukraine, I mean, the average Ukrainian sentiment of the over 50 cohort, I don't think they're very liberal. So I think obviously need Western pressure to make them liberal and to treat their large number of minorities with care. So it's basically my perspective. We have to back Ukraine, because it's basically a value fight. I don't think Ukraine provoked Russia. I mean, obviously they're clumsy and not as liberal as they could be. They provoked Russia because in the way that you provoke an empire when you don't like the empire. So my attitude's always been screw the USSR, and if Russia wants to act like the USSR, screw them. My one my one reservation has always been that we cannot have Russia become liberal. The moment Russia becomes liberal, they will collapse. And I don't care about the violence. What I care about is the loss of influence to China, particularly over the Far East. That's going to be a disaster. If China occupies the Far East and China becomes a littoral power in the Arctic, it'll be a disaster. So, how do you keep a country from falling apart and get it to be liberal at the same time? And I think it's almost impossible. I mean, Dagestan, Chechnya, they're gone. I mean, they're ready to be gone in a week's time if there's weakness in Moscow. And I think Putin knows this.
All right, listen, let me just jump in before we bring Jim in. It's too bad Victor is in here, Victor Medea, because Victor actually commanded the demonstration team at Fort Bragg in the Special Forces. And Victor essentially was, he speaks Polish and Russian. So when Victor came back from Vietnam, he was essentially, before he left the army, he wanted to stay in Special Forces when he was in the army. And we're talking about somebody who Alex and I know pretty well. But Victor, and I knew him from high school, but Victor was oriented to, land and fight in Poland and liberate Poland. I mean, that was his whole thing. And but the special forces was oriented to that. And then, getting back to the Second World War in terms of, the kind of things, I interviewed all the existing members who were still alive of the Deer Mission, that was what the OSS sent to Vietnam. And those guys were, to a man, opposed to the intervention in the war. I mean, one of them actually helped Ho Chi Minh write the Declaration of Independence. That he said Ho asked Paty, who died in Oakland, California, Archimedes Paty, to help him write the Declaration of Independence for Vietnam. So that part of the OSS, that whole
Record those
part.
conversations?
Pardon me. What?
Did you ever record those conversations?
I think I did. Yes, I recorded some of them.
You don't know where you
Recorded. They're
That'd be
they're either out in Texas or they're over in. They're most likely in Texas, and we're in the middle of trying to get them digitized. But the question there is like, okay, that was the impetus of the OSS, and when you meet guys who are in the operational groups of the OSS or the Jedburghs, they're a mixed, interesting crew of people. But the idea of actually working with, and you're right, of course, Julian, the question of they were confronted with, here are these resistance groups that are communist versus non-communist. That was always in the politics of the Second World War. Of course, they had to deal with the main problem of Tito in Yugoslavia, which they had no choice but to support. So the issue of then extrapolating that into Ukraine, and then frankly, someone was raising to me just a few days ago the whole question. I think we were talking about it just a few days ago. What happens if there's a collapse? What's going on with these Ukrainian troops that have fought? And if they're betrayed, because it looks to me like Trump is on, he's on a trajectory to basically sell them out. One could see revanchist, the kind of stuff that happened after World War II going on in Ukraine. And again, who knows what's going to happen? Go on, Jim.
I just wanted to comment, and I think I heard Julian say that we need to back insurgencies in countries that are occupied. And I think if that's what he was saying, I think there needs to be an exception for that, because the U.S. occupies lots of countries, and so we need an exception that we won't fund insurgencies to kick us out of those countries. We occupied South Vietnam. We still occupy Japan. We occupy Korea. And for a long time after World War II, we actually supported all these colonial countries to come back in as in Asia, when as the Japanese finally surrendered. So I think, the definition and the most practical one is Israel. Israel's occupying all sections of the West Bank and now Gaza. So there needs to be an exception if you're going to have this kind of rule that we should be back in insurgencies. Otherwise, we should be back in insurgencies in Gaza. You know, it's a strange thought that, you know, the U.S. somehow gets away with this, or the U.S. allies can do this kind of occupation, but you know, it's evil if somebody else does. Just saying.
Hey, Jim, can I respond? Hey, Jim's gone.
Go
Yeah,
on.
Jim, I actually, I mean, I completely agree with you. If I had to put a qualifier as to where and when to intervene, it would be a very conservative policy of only intervening in a region if that region is likely, if left on its own, to join an adversary. That's it, right? So, you know, the U.S. largely believed Fidel Castro when he said he would have an election, and then he didn't have an election. So frankly, I would have, you know, obviously I would have backed a giant Bay of Pigs invasion and sort of taken him out. You know, we've regretted it. We've regretted not taking him out. But I just want to highlight, you know, we have this
So you
big
favor us being the world policeman, where we get to impose our own forms of government and economic systems on the rest of the world. That's that what
no,
you're saying?
no, definitely not policemen. Definitely survival. I mean, we're not doing it because we're friendly. We're doing it because it makes us feel safer. And if someone makes us feel unsafe, you know, we clobber them. If they don't affect us, we shouldn't get involved. I mean, Trump is right. I mean, the U.S. got stretched to all sorts of ridiculous projects that were crazy expensive. I mean, what should
So wait,
happen
wait a
is
minute, just a minute, you said we have the right to attack people if we feel threatened, if we feel unsafe, then we have the right for a preemptive attack on somebody. Is that what you just said?
no, I never said a right to attack. I just said we should attack. I never made any reference to the law. If someone's a threat, you attack them, obviously. If they're too strong, then you get allies and you contain them. That's normally the most efficient way of dealing with a threat, right? If you
Well,
attack a threat that's stronger, you lose. So the U.S.
you're
obviously was not going to
essentially
attack the USSR at the beginning of the Cold War. The USSR had such an enormous advantage; it could have overrun all of Western Europe.
well,
So I mean,
you're
it's obviously.
essentially
Sorry,
saying
Alex.
that's essentially the Bush doctrine. We pre
Yeah.
we have to
I
preempt
mean,
any potential adversary, and you know, I think that you know we can we all should know how disastrous that's, you know. But
well, I
again,
mean,
I
the
will
different.
will say again, I'm much again with Jim, and you know, much more restrained foreign policy, um, and you know, and of course focusing on. I mean, I think we have plenty to do here at home. Um,
Yeah, I mean, definitely foreign intervention is stupidly expensive. I mean, the $1 trillion spent in Iraq. How can you spend that much money in one country? And I think it's several hundred billion spent in Afghanistan with absolutely nothing
oh
to show.
no, it's trillions in Afghanistan too when they
Good God! I mean, you could put
if
a
you
built a food base for that.
the good the people with the Watson Center the at Brown they have, oh no, it's the cost of war project. I mean, it's like 3 trillion. I think it's I mean, I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but a few years ago it was like 10 trillion for Iraq and like 3 trillion for. I mean, again, this is, you know, this is all legacy cost too. You know, what's the cost of healthcare for vets who fought there, and
Yeah,
the debt, you know, the debt is just exponentially is massive for those wars, and is, you know, in the trillions of dollars will eventually pay of in interest for all.
As,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
best I can tell, most of U.S. interventions have nothing to do with them being a threat. I mean,
right.
we intervened in Guatemala. Were they really a threat to us? We intervened in
I'm
Iran, you
guessing
know,
you
back in the
probably agree
50s.
with, you know, what Assange said, that the whole thing is basically a scam to wash, as Assange said, to wash money essentially from the taxpayer to the defense contractors and to, you know, to the whole military industrial complex and the trillions of dollars. It's all a, which of course that goes up to, you know, that goes to the big banks too, and that, you know, that gets channeled upwards to the rich. I mean, you
well,
can you know, you can travel. I don't know if you've how many times you've been to DC, Julian, but you know, you can travel around the area near DC and like all these communities that are essentially, you know, all these McMansions that are bought with defense contractor money. It's, you know, in like Alexandria and those counties.
no, I mean, obviously you want to have an institutional process which doesn't allow for profiteering. And it's, I have the Lily Puttian version here in Canada, in Ottawa, where we have, some pretty sad, pathetic truck manufacturers who are lobbying aggressively to, to then resell the stuff to Saudi Arabia. But sorry, the point I wanted to make
Really,
was,
can I really throw just on? I think if we could actually develop a system where you eliminated profiteering from the military industrial complex, we'd finally get peace in the world. Because they
yeah,
wouldn't make any money that way. They'd go and do it something that's not war.
well, I don't think the military. Well, my concern is, of course, Adolf Hitler with an atomic bomb. I mean, that's and the fact that the U.S. Didn't intervene on that is, far outweighs, a bunch of guys making money, because you can always claw it back. But my point was that we talk a lot about sort of freedom. We have this sort of this World War II cartoonish view of the French resistance going around and fighting for freedom, and that we have the special forces out there giving them the weapons. The reality is, if you read Anthony K. Brown's Bodyguard of Lies, it's like a 900-page book on the Enigma machine, and basically the deception to land the soldiers in D-Day. The book is like 25% on deception, because if you land on a beach where Hitler knows you're going, it'll be a slaughter. So this is, I mean, the real story. I mean, he goes into depth. The real story of the resistance in France is that for the British to be able to plant the lies, for the Germans to pick it up, they allowed members of the French resistance to collaborate with the Gestapo. And they had to give up thousands of people. And just there's this one story of this half Indian woman who was trained in England, sent over to France. And I mean, someone got her course report, and it was basically an obituary, which is, this woman is not competent, she's going to die. And so he details it in his book. She was sloppy with the codes. We have a picture of her. She was eventually arrested, tortured, and executed by the Gestapo. And it's estimated that several thousand people were betrayed. The key thing is, the man in charge of all the flights in and around of the Paris area was giving all the communications, the real communications. The British told him to give them the real communications, so there's high confidence, to the local Gestapo guy. You can Google it. After the war was over, the French took him to court for treason, and the British intervened. The guy was told to betray thousands of people. It was the only way to feed the Germans. And this is like 3 years later, the British were planting information. So when we're talking about these special forces guys, it's not young people jumping around. You might remember that 1990s show called V, where the humans unite to, stop some sort of alligator invasion of planet Earth. The reality is, if those special forces guys are going to go in there and betray thousands of people in the resistance. So I mean, that's I mean, and they have to do that. It's the only way to plant deception. So I strongly recommend Anthony K. Brown's The Bodyguard of Lies. Super well received.
I sure hope they put those things on the recruiting manual that you get when they hire you into one of those jobs where you're going to be betrayed.
All right, you're talking about Noor Khan, right, Julian?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That poor
right.
lady. She
right.
was one of thousands.
All right. Well, let's bring in ML. ML, you've been sitting there patiently listening to us yak away here, and Joan and Kenny just jump back in. I'm just going to say something. I'm going to relay a personal story that happened after 9/11. You know, I was brought down to the Council on Foreign Relations. The first time I went down there was an open bar, so I could get all that shit out of my lungs that I had breathed in that day downtown. Because if you guys remember, those of us who are New Yorkers, the whole damn city stunk of that debris. And having been down there that day, I had to get 5 gin and tonics in a row. And I'm not a drinker. So I did get a little tipsy, but 5 gin and tonics, double gin and tonics, they did a number and cleared out all that dust. Now, about a week or two later, I was asked to participate. I'm not going to get into, the gory details of it, but it was a discussion about what should the United States do in Afghanistan? How should we intervene? And everybody in New York were all people who had been in Afghanistan. I had never been in Afghanistan. I was just simply there as, observer. I was brought in by somebody. But everybody there had been in Afghanistan during the Mujahideen War and knew how problematic it was going to be to intervene on the ground. Now, remember, I was still I sort of was coming down from my bloodlust revenge feeling I had, which was always there. I wanted to take revenge against these people for doing what they did. I know people who were killed in the towers. I knew a cop who was killed who I'd been friends with. And I was always worried about friends of mine who were in both the North and South Towers, who luckily got, for a variety of reasons, were lucky to escape. And the question became, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to go intervene, and how are we going to ally ourselves with this problematic coalition in Afghanistan that we're going to have to fight with, that we already knew had all these dilemmas? And that's the issue. Yeah, 5 gins. Yeah, it does clear out your brain, Jimbo. Um, and then the question became, like, everybody was, what then? What then? And remember, this was close to the time there was the conference in Bonn where there was a quote unity. And remember, we already, looking back on it, this is when Cover Black had come in, what, a week after or a couple of days after 9/11 and said we have to, involve ourselves in 60 countries around the world. We have to mount a grand covert war against Islamic fundamentalism and jihadism. Anyway, I just posed that as something I vividly remember because, that was like one hell of a day. I remember having a big fight with somebody in the CIA down in Washington who was pretty gung ho. And anyway, I'll stop right there. Go on, ML.
Oh, I wonder what we're floating on for the topic of Ukraine or
Well,
Israel.
we're,
I
well,
saw
we're,
that.
we're talking about we'll talk about Ukraine basically. I mean, this is sort of all around Ukraine. I mean,
Right. Yeah, I don't have any other answers other than, the you had Putin on on American soil on Friday, and then, 3 days later, thankfully there was, Europe, and Zelensky in the White House. I thought that was interesting, but I will say I think that I don't know who knows if this thing's going to go through or not. I don't think so. I think most people know that it's probably not. And this is just for whatever reason a supercharged version of like trying to get something going when nothing was going before. But I will say I think that Ukraine, looking back, kind of looking back in the past, during these 3 years, sure, yeah, pursue NATO or whatever as much as possible with the EU, but plan B should have been, getting together with Azerbaijan and all the stands and all that, all the border around Russia, and get together and come up with some kind of anti-Russian, coalition, maybe economic, maybe military. Of course, this is hindsight in 2020, and this is infinitely harder for Ukraine anyway, because they're under extreme duress. But I think that if anything is gonna hurt Russia, and if there's something to be exploited, I find it not coincidental that Azerbaijan and Armenia were in the White House and doing that signing, just weeks before that whole thing. Anyway, the point is that the connective tissue to that, which could really make Russia hurt if we want to pursue it, would be Turkey, Azerbaijan, even Israel, and maybe a couple other people in the Middle East that are around that area that aren't friendly with Russia or don't, or it's in their best interest to not mess with that situation, because the Russians like to do their foreign policy with hands on. That's just how they operate. They do economic deals and whatnot too, but it's really about boots on the ground for them. That's their version of control of some kind. And we know this because Russia was the middleman for Armenia and Azerbaijan for a long time and was going to be the peacekeeping force. And we saw how that ended up. But in any case, I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but I think the path to really hurt Russia would be these secondary sanctions and smacking India around a little bit, and maybe even China. But China has a vested interest, if the stands are involved, or if Azerbaijan, like those countries, we could make it very much worth their while to be economically integrated even more so than to bypass Russia. And there's already a pipeline going in. I mean, it's already there. It doesn't mean that we're going to be super friendly, buddy buddy, and I don't think we ever would. America would, but I think that could be a solution. But that's all speculation. So I mean, added to the heap of
Yeah, right. We're all
armchair
speculating here, man.
quarterback,
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
But,
Exactly.
but
Exactly.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
gotta,
I think that Putin is vulnerable, though. The longer this does go on, I find myself having to be a little bit gun shy of trusting any kind of media reports from the West about how weak Russia is, because you know, every other 6 months or so, you would see something like collapse now. So I'm sensitive to that, and I don't like that. I wish the media wouldn't have done that and just been straight up and called balls and strikes when Ukraine, sure, great, cheer, rah rah. But when Russia was coming back from that, and regaining territory, there's this sad element of not being objective and admitting strength where there is some, even at the cost of a human, the meat grinder, just turning the crank on it there. But I don't know. I don't really have too much more to add than that. But I don't know. I think there's a pathway there that we could really put the hurt on Russia if Trump is so inclined to do. But that's what the Trump score is. This week he seems to be leaning more toward Ukraine. Well, maybe another week he'll lean more toward Putin or whatever. So
yeah, yeah. Good points, man. Well, let me just throw a little monkey wrench into this discussion. So, because we haven't had ML here for a while, and I was having fun today going back and forth on the good old Epstein stuff, and like who could have invented a monkey wrench out of left field except for this kind of issue? It's like, like you got everybody in Democrats, Republicans, Independents, all are up in arms about this. And, Trump, of course, I think they were fighting today. The judges decided not to release the grand jury testimony. Because I was surprised that the DOJ of Trump decided to go back into that argument. And so, again, and I was listening yet last night to actually a first big meeting of all these people to set up they want to set up a congressional commission to investigate the Epstein files. Now, and it was everybody on there. There were QAnon guys there. There were the whole gamut of people, people who thought that Epstein was still alive. Who the hell knows? And it was a whole panel
so
of
so is
people talking
Tupac.
about this. And it was like, but to me, it was like, and and I'm sitting there saying, my old cynical self about commissions. Commissions are a good way to stall an issue. At least that's my political acumen. I opened my big mouth. I said, well, wait, like I've actually lobbied on Capitol Hill. Oh yeah, you know what? And it was sort of interesting to watch. But what do people think about this now, interrelated to what we're talking about? I mean, because some will argue that what we've been seeing for the past couple of weeks is basically the distraction argument. Okay, he's raising these up all the time to take attention away from this really difficult issue for him politically. And let me start with ML, like and then of course we can go back to Ukraine and Kenny, we can go roundabout, like whatever the hell you want to do. But go on, ML. What do you think about all this?
I think it is a distraction, and I think it's sad that was used like that. And I think we know that it's a distraction because pardon my language, but every fucking grifter on the internet is taking advantage of it some kind of way. And when you see that happen, you know that there's nothing substantial that's going to happen or will happen. Period. And I would also add, and I use this full well in a half serious, half joking nature, but you also have Laura Loomer, who's essentially like the right's MAGA vampire. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I mean, she's a vampire. I mean, if you look at her, she looks like a vampire. And what the left has vampires too, but I think that's also interesting too, like where Trump has this endless distraction machine or whatever, And you couple that with my new analogy about trying to explain Trump is if anybody remembers the Steve Jobs version of Apple, and when there would be a new tech thing that would come out, nobody would know, there would be rumors out the butt until you actually heard it 5 seconds after it was announced on stage. Then you knew for sure that was it. But also with Steve Jobs, there was also this with Apple fans that were made fun of. There's this reality distortion field that happens too with that. So I think that Trump has a little bit of that going on. Only he has ability to kind of throw the distortion field out or whatever, and then kind of warp everything around that. So I do think that it is a distraction. And I voted for Trump, so I fully support him up,
We
for,
still like UML. Don't worry about it,
well,
man.
yeah, well, as much as I can, like the things that, I don't like. I think Pam Bondi brought that whole, I think that was an own goal, 100%, because you have Pam Bondi, you controlled you controlled your press release. Like,
Right.
nobody put words in your mouth. You're the
Right.
one that raised the expectation. And then
Exactly.
there's this, like, you fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
Like when okay, we got all these other things. Okay, so just go with it for now. Like, you have all these wins, whatever. You have all these things, executive order after like a hurricane of them coming through, trying to create momentum. Some are garbage, some are serious and very important to the whole thing, and it goes out. But then you have this self goal of the thing, and then I mean, I don't understand why are you going to bring it? That's
Why
the
bring
one.
it up? Why bring it up at all?
Well, right. Like, if you're not going to do anything with it or whatever, or you're
Yeah.
just going to play footsie with it or whatever, that's fine, I guess. But, like, don't keep bringing up. And this actually shows kind of that the Democrats are still in a very, very weak position still, because way back in March or February, they had the whole, sorry, I need to turn that off. The whole Epstein
I thought you're
binders
blowing
thing.
bubbles and shit.
Yeah, yeah, at the White House or whatever. You know what I'm talking about? Um where all the grifter MAGA jackass grifter types were all there with the binder in there.
Oh yeah, yeah,
The
yeah,
big
yeah,
old
yeah,
smile.
yeah.
That thing was a joke,
Right.
a hilarious joke, and they did that on themselves. But the Democrats couldn't take advantage of it. So you just have this thing recurring over and over and over again, and I'm sure let's drag the dead body out and then we'll whip it again, in 3 months or whatever, if there's another thing. But I also think that we're also kind of in the summer and we're starting to go back to school, thank God. But the July and August, aside from Iran or whatever, like it's either been Mamdani or Epstein or
Yeah.
Ukraine or Gaza. Like, pretty much that's been it end to end, and it wears people out. It gets tired. So I don't know how much more effective it'll be going in the future. But anyway, long-winded, but that's
Right.
what
No,
I.
no, no, no. Thank you. Thank you. Well, and Laura, of course, today entered into the fray by basically, it's amazing. She's like the whisperer to Trump. She basically argues today that like disabled kids shouldn't be sent from Gaza to the West to be treated medically. I mean, give me, and we already know the kind of stuff she's pulled. I think she was able to get a professor at the military academy that a friend of mine knows who taught at West Point. He was able to get she was able to get him this professor to basically not be able to be appointed to her position. Amazing stuff. But what do other people have to say about this issue? Joan, you want to chime in here? Go on, Julian.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, I'm an outsider, but my impression is that the Epstein file is not being pushed by the Democrats. Maybe it's just what silo I'm sitting in. I mean, I think the Epstein affair is tied to those who don't support U.S. policy on Gaza. Basically, as long as Gaza's there, Epstein's going to be floating around, and Trump is backing Israel very strongly, and so he's got this Epstein thing following around. I mean, I didn't follow every bloody detail, but it doesn't look like, aside from showing up to a couple of parties, that I mean, Trump really. I mean, did he visit the island? and I don't think he visited the island that often. If he did, I mean, I think he knew all these people. Like, people know people with money. But I actually thought, Trump would get his girls from a better place, right? I mean, he's got supermodels from Czechoslovakia. Why would he need whatever the heck that Epstein was peddling? So
Actually, Epstein stole a couple of his girls. If you remember.
well, that yeah, I to be honest, I'd heard that, yeah.
Joan, by the way, was unmuting. She wanted to chime in. Joan, do you want to unmute and chime in here? Joan? All right, just when you unmute, start. Excuse me, Alex. Jill, go on.
Yeah, no, I just want to, Gaza, the Gaza issue is not going to go away for a very long time. It has a huge impact on because of changed demography from immigration. I don't mean Muslim immigration. I got students from India who, in theory, should be Modi supporters and therefore anti-Islamic because of this pain in the ass Pakistan. But when they come here, and I saw this 20 years ago when I did interviews, Indian and Pakistani members of parliament in Canada end up being allies because they have the same policies on immigration. So people forget in 1 or 2 generations the politics of where they came from. So we have South Asians who are Hindu coming in very large numbers to Canada, and they see the Gaza affair as a colonial affair. So I mean, it's in every classroom.
Interesting. Wow.
So yeah, I mean, so they're the ones bringing the Gaza and the Epstein issue along.
Wow.
That's my point.
All right, Joan's come on. I just want to add, I'm looking forward to see how Columbia deals with this in the next couple of days. I'm going to go on campus tomorrow. Go on, Joan.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. So much information because I've been listening to the People's Forum. They're having those classes on socialism, and it's just so much information. I think we all need to be ashamed of this country. This country has been horrible, like really horrible. I I don't even know what to say. And I have to read more on the Ukraine because they sound just as bad, and I don't know enough on it. But I think you men have to question yourselves too for all this sex stuff because I don't know. And I don't know with her, that Maxwell. She's not going to talk unless they let her go. So I don't know what's going to go with there. But thank you. Thank you for having this.
All right, go on, Alex.
Yeah, well, I just note again, I put it in the chat. MSN, they have a report, I guess this has come out, that the House Oversight Committee is going to receive Epstein documents from the DOJ this week. And I don't know what will come out of that. I know they also, again, there is one Democrat, at least, who's making a big deal of Epstein, which is Ro Khanna. And actually, him and the Libertarian Republican Thomas Massey,
right,
they've announced that they will have Epstein victims coming to Congress, I think in early September, to testify again. I don't know which committee.
Right. Well, this is the and this
Massey. That'll be interesting anyway.
Massey has signed up with the people wanting to have a commission. Go on, Kenny. Go on, Kenny.
You got to mute, Ken.
Unmute myself. There we go.
Wait.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
You got to bring up the volume, Ken. You're very.
I'm going to push something here. Wait a second. Where's that pin? Oh, there we go. Okay. So yeah, I just wanted to recommend that make a recommendation to Joan DeLorenzo. You got to look into moving to Antarctica. You might like the society there a little better. This planet is composed of human beings, and unfortunately, they don't all come from heaven or Walt Disney Studios. They have different attitudes and things and behaviors that you may or may not like, and you may have attitudes and behavior they might not like. This is Earth. We're not on some, Olympic mountain. So whatever criticism, I think it's foolish to say this is the worst country in the world. Maybe you haven't traveled. If you don't like it here, go down to what's that coming? Yemen. There's a good place to start. See how you like it there. Anyhow, I had a thing that you haven't discussed on the Ukraine situation here, and I'll share it with you. It's a thing that started in World War One, and what I'm going to do is have the computer read it, I think. If I can do that here like this, let's see if it works. There it goes.
Self-determination, the process by which a group of people, usually possessing a certain degree of national consciousness, form their own state and choose their own government. As a political principle, the idea of self-determination evolved at first as a byproduct of the doctrine of nationalism, to which early expression was given by the French and American revolutions. In World War I, the Allies accepted self-determination as a peace aim. In his 14 points, the essential terms for peace, U.S. President Woodrow Wilson listed self-determination as an important objective for the post-war world. The result was the fragmentation of the old Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires and Russia's former Baltic territories into a number of new states.
There you go. And
Except the colonies, they didn't get
And
self-determination.
African American were.
so, no, you can always find the other side of it. But I did see that, one pundit or World War II historian was saying after World War II, they kind of followed through with the same concept. And, or sort of, in World War I, they broke up the Middle East and say who got what. But there was the idea of allowing people to have a group concept of self-determination, sovereignty of the state.
Except in the South Pacific.
Sovereignty of the individual is always in combat with sovereignty of the state.
Wow.
It's a concept, it's a balance. You
All
can't
right,
go one way or the other.
All right, the 14 points
Yeah.
were highly controversial at the time. They were put forth by Woodrow Wilson.
Uh-huh.
They were opposed by France, Britain, Italy, all the major powers at the time, of course, were very upset with Woodrow Wilson because what happened? All the different nationalist movements in the colonies began to harp on the 14 points. And that also included what you talked about in Eastern Europe, because that was the fragmentation of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But what did they do? I mean, that in a way, it's interesting because the 14 points, the aftermath of World War I and the world order imposed at Versailles, I mean, that's where you sort of see the seeds of what then takes fruit after the Second World War, big time. Because
Right.
all the nationalist movements came against the aspirations, United States, and remember, there was a big, huge argument about the United States. The, I quote, isolation of the United States. They basically refused to participate in the post-war. I mean, we did participate in the post-war settlement, but we didn't do it in a security fashion, which is similar to what's going on right now with Trump, because the Senate voted against. I mean, that actually led to Woodrow Wilson's death, and it was interesting. His wife was running the White House, Woodrow Wilson's wife. She was
Right.
actually the de facto president, sort of like how they compare to Biden in a way. Now, but people like Ho Chi Minh, he goes to Versailles. He gets inspired by the 14 points. He is ignored. I could go on down the list. There's all these different people. There's all these people who came and were promised nations. In the case of the Middle East, you had the Balfour Declaration that set up the Jewish, recognized a Jewish state in Palestine, which was juxtaposed with the promises made to the Arab countries or Arab national sentiments in the Middle East that set up the conflict we're experiencing right now, that we're seeing played out, in the 21st century. Those are the parameters that were set at that period of time. So,
Yes,
this
I understand,
issue,
but you got to
yeah.
watch it when you talk about the Middle East. There was no Muslims prior to 630. Zero. That's when the religion started.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
That's right.
and somebody else was
But
living all
that's-
through the Middle East
well,
before there were Muslims.
There's no doubt that
So when
whoever,
somebody
And
says,
a
we
few
were here
hundred
first,
years
it's ours,
earlier,
it's ours, it's ours. By
a few
force of
hundred years
arms,
earlier,
they
there were
took
no
Spain.
Christians.
There were no Christians. Well, not before the year zero, right? or
Yeah, but
100, maybe
yeah,
200.
but look, the issue of the synchronism of the Quran is the Bible is a synchronistic document. The New Testament is by meaning there you can see the influences of other religions. In the case of whoever put together the Quran and how it's evolved, well, we haven't had that subject at least openly due to all sorts of
It's
political
very
reasons.
dangerous to talk about it.
Exactly. And there was a whole project to be set up in Berlin to do the same thing with the Quran. And then, of course, it got nixed because of aftermath of 9/11. But you can read the Quran, you could look at the Quran in any kind of detail and see all these different kind of religious intellectual influences in the Middle East and in the period prior, because Islam is influenced by Judaism. It's influenced by all sorts of forms of Christianity,
Yeah.
especially Nestorian. There's all the different sects that were in the area
Well, I
propagating
understand.
there.
So we don't want to look. You're
Yeah,
not.
but I mean, so the point there is like one cannot, you know, there's always this continuum of streams of ideas and thought
That's right.
that
There's
interact with
various
each other.
vectors and there's various vectors. There's the wind, there's the ocean, there's gravity, there's the needing to eat. There's all kinds of factors in anything that manifests itself. That's true. I'm just bringing up that was a concept that, look, that's Castro taking over Cuba, and
Well, yeah, he felt he was taking it over and declaring
people come up. We're going to
self-determination.
free the people. We're always
Yeah,
going to
well,
free the people. We're going to secede, or we're going to form a new country, or and so forth. And it goes on and so forth. And then there's force. Might makes right, or democracy. The democracy is based in the concept of a majority rule, with discretion of, like, you can't use a majority rule to oppress a minority, but it's basically majority rule, and that's there. So anyhow, I'm just saying that concept, that Woodrow Wilson concept, Wilson, that some of the generals in World War II or other political figures were saying, well, let's do the same thing with breaking up the Baltic states and breaking up the Middle East. Let people have their own expression, just like the pilgrims who came to America and so forth. Of course, everybody's mostly concerned about their own freedom. We don't really care that much about the rights of Indians. They can fight amongst themselves, but we could knock them out because we have to have the right to be pioneers. Anyhow, I'm just saying it's one of the ideas as a factor in this. I just say this. I'm on record from day one. Ukraine just should have backed down, and I agree with what the Trump is saying. You don't have any cards. He says you don't got anything. Here's Russia, the size of Russia with its military and its atomic weapons and its connections and industries and everything, and you're a little state. So don't stop acting like you're just an equal to Russia. And and then you're ignoring the different things that you did that might have been criminal in the past, in terms of denying the people in the Donbass their right to have sovereignty as a group, and their decision to stay with the Russians. Look, we get that kind of secularism, not secularism, in the US, in New York, in LA, everywhere. You get neighborhoods, clusters of people who are bound by heritage or religion or language or
And you
custom.
don't mean secularism, you mean
Say, not secularism, not
Sectarianism.
the right word.
Sectarianism.
Secularism.
Yeah, I know. Secularism is like anti-religious. I understand.
Yeah.
But it's, you get the clusters of social clustering.
Yeah.
It's a very common thing. And so I'm just bringing that up, is that it doesn't go away, and nobody's immune to it. But it's got to be considered as one of the factors.
All right, I agree with you.
It's still going on. Wait a minute. This was
Yeah.
in the news yesterday.
What?
Still going on in Rwanda. They're still fighting between the Hutus and the Tutsis.
Oh yeah, well yeah, well,
It's still going on, and
Oh, well, it's been going on ever
Rwanda
since.
is a brutal, brutal dictatorship.
brutal, and so, and it's going on
Yeah,
all
but
over the world.
but I'll say
It's
something
human
about
beings.
Trump.
It's human
Look,
beings, but it's also other species
all
have
right,
stuff.
yeah, but Trump last week. Well, look, let's get down to the bottom line about Trump.
Yeah, I know.
Trump-
But he's going
Trump
to
just
die
wants to
someday,
make
and you'll
money.
have the same situation.
He wants to
Stop
make
blaming
money
Trump.
for himself. Period.
You're ridiculous, Jim.
Oh, get
You're
out of
your
here. He wants to
mind.
make money for himself. That's
Jim,
it.
he has more money than you and your entire heritage of all the people you've ever
know
met
what?
in your life.
You know what?
Why would he need money? What is
well, look how much he's doubled the amount of his worth.
No.
Ever since he became president, I think he's doubled his worth since January 20th. I mean, he got a $400 million jet. I mean, give me anyway.
Don't be jealous, Jim. Stop it.
Go on, Julian.
You got your looks.
Give me a break. Go on, Julian.
All right, yeah, three points. I know it sounds crazy, but one of the reasons why colonialism didn't contradict the principle of self-determination is that from the very beginning at the Berlin Conference, I think it was 1884, 1885, the European powers sat down and they agreed that colonialism would be temporary. If they didn't have a conference in Berlin and split up Africa and Asia, they would have gone to war. So Africa would have been colonized anyway, but with a heck of a lot more violence between the Europeans. Africa got colonized because it's super weak and was on important real estate. So,
let's see. All right, Julian.
Okay, no, let me finish, Jim.
All right, go on.
That's number one.
How many African countries were at that meeting where they decided that
None, because
colonialism
they're
was
too weak.
okay?
If the African
That's
countries,
the issue. They didn't make it up there.
no, if the African
Go on.
if the
Go on.
African countries were strong, they would have shown up. Ethiopia, for example, was not colonized until much later because they had artillery.
They just had Wolseley go through them. When was the expedition of Wolseley when he went through Ethiopia? It was
much
before
later.
1881. No, I think it was before 1881. I could be wrong, but
Ethiopia was independent until 1935. It was invaded.
Yeah. But Wolseley launched a punitive expedition against the Ethiopians. I think it was before 1881. I'm going to check.
Because these guys have absolutely no sense of like restraint. Anyway, so that was my first point. It's very obvious that Africa was not working on a space program when the Europeans invaded. They were incredibly poor, no infrastructure. The Europeans at least they sat down and said, you know what, this will be temporary. We transfer technology to them, we get out. We don't know when we're going to get out, but that's the best possible outcome you couldn't gotten. Number two, if you look at the UK, you like to think of Europeans imposing themselves on the developing world, but it started off as the British imposing themselves on the French, the Dutch, and the Americans. And now the entire planet is a photocopy of the British political system, right? I mean, this is the only way good political systems spread, which is, sometimes you beat people up, like you make Napoleon go somewhere and you force them to have I think there was a constitutional monarchy under Louis XVIII or something. That's just the way history's gone. I mean, it's the third thing is the reason we protect countries like Ukraine is that democracies are always weak. The reason Zelensky lost Ukraine early in the war is because the guy was left of center. He was getting the women's vote. He didn't like to do military spending. All leaders are like this. That's what the British were like. That's what the French were like in World War II. That's what the Canadians are like now. They're all wusses. Democratic politicians do not know how to prepare for war, right? So, we're always going to lose the first couple of battles as a democracy. Right now, Trump is super, super lucky. America is mega productive. It's 25% of the world's GDP. And I got to tell you, Trump is milking it for everything. If Trump was doing this in the late 70s, when the U.S. was down to 17%, the U.S. would have gotten screwed over. So, kudos to Trump for taking advantage of a good situation, which is, frankly, Americans are the hardest working people on the planet, right? But, it's not going to last. One day, developing countries are going to get nuclear weapons. I mean, the Pakistanis are 10 years away from fractional orbital bombardment systems, where they put warheads in orbit and then drop them on other people's cities. Pakistan could do that easily, right? They don't because they want to look nice. But they're already what is it, 220 million people, right? They're already 2/3 of the US population. They're going to pass the US population probably before the end of this century, right? So before that happens, we should support all of these little tiny weak democracies and save them. Otherwise, they'll get gobbled up. If Putin conquered Ukraine, it would take him probably 15 years to convert the population back to being Russian and to erase any sense of independence. And so we'd be outnumbered. That's my points, Jim.
All right. Well, okay.
Well,
Okay. Go
Julian,
on. Jim. Wait. Alex. I'll let Jim go into it. Go on, Jim.
I just was going to suggest to Julian that you read how Europe underdeveloped Africa
yeah, I
to
was
get
gonna say
a
that.
get a good sense of what really went on and how the corruption and warmongering to destroy African civilization that was there, was went about. So I think it's worth it's a really good book. That's
Well,
all I wanted to say.
Julian has.
To mention the Patniak, these two
All right.
husband and wife economic team. They've calculated that, well, there's the best case for the British in India, for example, is that they extracted $42 trillion, with inflation worth of resources from India. So again, imperialism is always brutal, exploitative, and not to the advantage of the,
Right.
And killed about
Right.
100
always
million.
about
All right,
Indians.
Julian. All right, Julian has Julian. Okay, now I'm gonna have to read those goddamn books you always are arguing about. What are those books again? You're always arguing about.
They're on the side. You can click the link. One is the case for colonialism. The other one is not stolen.
Yeah,
What is it
I got a
called?
question on that. Wait a second. This is probably a myth. Uh, England came down into India and they put in a railroad system. They left, no change, still the same railroad system. No bullet trains, no progress. They didn't enhance it. It's just the existing thing that the British left there.
That's not true. Of course,
All right.
Maybe it's a myth.
that's
All right,
the Congress Party.
wait.
Billions of dollars
Alex, hold tight a second. Alex, so what's the other book? The Case for Colonialism, and what's the other title?
It's on the side link, not stolen.
Not Stolen.
Yeah, it talks about how indigenous land in North
All right.
America was not stolen; it was
All right.
purchased by
All right.
Eagar First Nations who
All right.
wanted to
All right.
sell the land because they were
I
sick and tired
promise.
of hunting in the
All right.
forest
I
and wanted to
promise
become like
that
the rich
I will
Europeans.
read. I promise that I will read the books, and
Okay.
then we'll have a lot of fun arguing about what's in those
Oh.
goddamn books. Okay, I look forward to that one because Not Stolen: The Truth About European Colonialism in the New World, and the other one. Okay, I'll go look at
What was the other one? So I'll grab it and put it in the chat. What was
Okay,
it?
thanks.
The
The other
title?
one was A Case for Colonialism.
Okay, thank you.
They're really, really good
Yeah.
books.
All
Well,
right,
I have to give an acknowledgement to Julian. That you're very brave to bring that up. Thank you.
No, he's brought it up before.
I've heard those arguments.
Yeah, no. I think they're important to argue and talk about.
Okay.
And
Jim,
I look forward to look at ripping those goddamn books apart.
go ahead, Jim. Jim, there is an easy case. There's a chapter in the Case for Colonialism that argues that there was never a genocide under the King of Belgium, and that all the people who had their arms chopped off were slavers. Let the games begin. Let the games begin.
Well, Jim, you should also then read Walter Rodney, again, the book mentioned. Jim.
Well, Walter, there's lots of books about this subject besides Walter. I mean, boy, it's a big industry about these kind of books. So anyway, I look forward to looking at this because it's a very serious argument. It's the kind of arguments we hear made that colonialism, was actually la-di-da for everybody. And
Clarifying question, just to the group.
Yeah.
Does anybody know are there any formerly colonial African states that actually are not devolved into civil wars and chaos and utter poverty currently? I don't mean it as a joking or being pejorative. I'm just asking, have there been any successful former colonial African countries at all?
The French ones get pretty close, like Cote d'Ivoire. I think it's because of the French.
Okay, cool. I just had a
Well, well,
question.
it's a very interesting and complicated issue because first of all, you have to talk about the differences in colonialism nationwide. There were differences between the French, between the English, between the Portuguese. Then you have issues like settler colonial societies that are like South Africa or Rhodesia, and what occurs in the Portuguese colonies. And then you get the question of, okay, so the transatlantic slave trade. Okay, so the transatlantic slave trade, I don't want to get into arguing about this right now because there's all these different ramifications. The transatlantic slave trade, okay, there's a certain blame on the Muslim countries. Absolutely. There was a certain percentage of people who were exported from the continent due to the dominance of the Muslim powers internally. But then, of course, there was the interaction with the European powers on the coast of Africa that went on from from the time of the Portuguese establishing themselves. And again, slavery, as we know, was already existing in the world, all over the world. Okay, it was
When
in
did
Europe,
it
it
stop?
was in Asia,
What caused it to stop?
British.
it still goes on. It still goes on.
Do you know how many
Slavery.
people died in the British Navy getting rid of slavery? Tens of thousands. It wasn't
Well,
an easy. They didn't go there and say,
I
"Don't
would,
do this
I would,
anymore."
Tens
where
of
do you get
thousands,
an
no.
estimate
Yeah,
that
like 10,000, 20,
The
20.
Royal Navy lost tens of thousands of people fighting to destroy slavery.
I think
No.
so. That's the
No,
number I think.
I doubt that very much.
I
I
mean,
don't doubt that they look.
America
Let me give you an example of what that meant in reality. So
Yeah.
let's say in the period after Waterloo, when they were, quote, interdicting the slave trade. What would they do? Okay, so what they do is they'd interdict a slaver, and then they'd bring him to a West African colony that they dominated, and they would give them a choice. You guys can be resold into slavery, or you can go to the West Indies as part of the West India Regiment. And I listened to a guy deliver a paper like this at the American Historical Association a couple of years ago. So, I mean, so one can go, I mean, it's sort of an interesting argument to make about colonialism and imperialism and all that. But, when you get into the innards and the realities and the histories of imperialism, colonialism in these different parts of the world, the guys on the receiving end don't necessarily look on it as the most benevolent thing in the world. And so, and certainly after World War II, boy, I could say, well, the Indians, if they loved imperialism and colonialism so much, they would never have
Okay.
launched an
Excuse me.
independence movement to free themselves from British imperialism. And all those people in Southeast Asia, if they loved the French and the Dutch so much, they wouldn't have waged relentless guerrilla war against them. And in China, China, the Chinese were, there was attempts to basically dominate them. Uh, yeah, so 17 to 20,000, they probably died of disease. I'd say most of those guys died of disease because before
Yeah, yeah. It says
1860,
both combat
yeah,
and
before 1860, what is the essential winning parts of the expansion of Europe into Africa is the ability to create antidotes to malaria, quinine,
yeah, they might not have gotten that
meningitis,
if they didn't have to go to Africa to free the
railroads.
slaves.
All right. Another time. This would,
I
to
just
get,
wanted to point out, I
yeah,
just said that out of the air.
I
So
know you did. You got it. And I won't say what part of the body you took it from either.
pulled it right out.
Yeah,
But
I
there
know
you
you. I know.
go.
Okay. I could say what part of your body you pulled that right out of. I
Yeah.
understand.
So, just be practical about it.
Yeah, I'll be practical
Oh, and
about
that doesn't count the Americans who died fighting the South to eliminate slavery in the U.S.
Well,
How many U.S. soldiers died from the Union Army?
I had relatives who died fighting against slavery in the Civil War, so I certainly understand the importance of that. They died in Texas, and one died in the fighting in Virginia. So I know all about that stuff.
What is that? You're
Yeah.
saying you're related to somebody who died in the?
I had lots of family on both sides of my family who fought in the Civil War on the side of North, on the North.
Yeah,
Big
there you
deal.
go.
So what? Mazel tov. Big deal.
Big deal.
Yeah, that's right. Big deal.
Okay.
We're all
Big deal.
Americans. We're all
But then
Americans.
stop blaming everybody for buying slaves that were
Well,
brought to the coast
Julian,
by
I didn't bring up imperialism, colonialism. Julian threw that little grenade into the mix here tonight. Anyway,
No, it's a good point. I feel relieved that you can be able to talk about this thing. You know, freedom of speech and expression doesn't mean that you just say things that are politically correct.
well,
You may
it's
say something that people disagree with.
well, I agree, but then of course, one, as Julian knows, these kind of things are subject to rigors of scholarship.
No,
Wait,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
wait,
validation, right.
sorry. Jim
Uh,
asked for a book justifying the opium
Yeah,
trade. There it is by Fenby, and the argument is very simple.
yeah.
The Chinese were already doing it, and in World War II, the Japanese cooperated with Mao Zedong in setting up opium fields.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, and
And
thank you,
then,
Ken. That's right. Thank
and
you,
then,
Ken.
and then
Thank you. I got a nod
and
from
then
Ken.
ML put a very good book. I would also recommend Pekka Hamelian's. I forget Hamalian. How do you pronounce that goddamn last name? Hamalainen. He teaches at. I think he teaches at Oxford or Cambridge. He did a good book on the Comanches. And this book on the Lakota is a great book that he did.
Why were they called the Opium Wars? I mean, why did the British have to go in there with their ships to enforce the ability to sell opium in China? It
Because
was a good thing.
it's a question of who gets the revenue, the Chinese government or the Sassoon family.
Yeah,
Right. Well, you know, you
similar
have
to the opioids in the U.S. You know, it's a family that got rich selling a drug.
well,
Yeah,
John,
like the Roosevelts.
John
Yeah.
Astor.
The Roosevelts, that's where they made all their money.
Well, the Astor,
You
the
can go
Astor
any
family.
country you go to, you're going to find scoundrels and saints.
Well, it's not a question. Look, it made sense till after the establishment of the Republic. I think they start trading for opium like the first decade of the 19th century.
Yeah.
You start sending ships, clipper ships,
Uh-huh.
were basically opium transports to
Yeah.
Asia. I mean, you know, like, I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that Americans.
Now you just have to go to 59th Street and Broadway, right? You can
Well, I
get
mean,
fixed up.
one cannot buy opium easily in New York City, unfortunately.
Not
But
anymore.
My wife tells me that and this was witnessed by her father, her grandfather, who was a big landowner in Suzhou, China, lost most of his land because of opium addiction.
Oh yeah, it's a drug you only try once. You only try once and you never touch it again, ever. It is so good. It is much too good. You just say, "Wow, now I understand." But hey, anybody who grew up in New York around guys who are addicted to heroin, they should know better.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, you know, like, and you know, I can't, you know, I know all these different friends of mine who just they had their monkey on their backs and it got them. So, you know,
Yeah.
anyway, so
Hey,
is there any
before we
more
go,
fun
we
things
gotta.
we can talk about?
Well, we
Um,
should, have you guys gotten into South Park and Trump?
Oh
Oh.
God, that was hilarious.
I mean,
the one a few
I
weeks
have the
ago.
clip, the one with
what,
oh
Christie?
no, Christy Nome. That was they really got her good.
Oh, they'll probably do
But
one on
I
the
mean, she
occupation of
deserves it,
Washington.
but they really the
They'll
whole thing
probably
with,
do one on the occupation of Washington. I think that'd be a great theme to do.
oh no, that's actually I heard that's next week's episode.
Well,
Seriously,
Oh, they're taking over Washington?
or you know the South Park town is that's
Well,
that's
I think we can all agree that Quebec is the worst province and country known to man in the world.
Oh, Quebec.
I'm
There you
kidding.
go, Julian.
you don't want to get
That's a joke. That's a
you don't want to
joke.
get Julian fired from
Yeah,
his.
let's get Julian to get in there.
Julian is in yeah, he's in Montreal. Right?
Yeah, he's in Montreal. Yeah, that's his little office is in that. We can actually probably geolocate him on that picture there.
Yeah, my office is in the middle of the right
Oh.
side of that thing.
Go
No, I
on,
love-
Jimbo. Jimbo, yeah, go on.
Can you stick your hand out and wave out the window so we can see you?
Okay, so professors have been asking to open the windows for like 50 years, and they said it's a safety hazard. So all the windows are sealed shut.
Oh wow, what a drag!
What,
Yeah.
what
They
was
think
the
you guys are going to jump out the building or some shit?
Okay, when my father was working there in the early 70s, one of the students who didn't have a lot of money was sleeping in the vents and he fell down 10 stories.
Oh,
Ooh,
And for 6 months, there's a weird smell coming out of the vents.
oh
Oh,
They
boy,
geez.
sent someone in and they found this completely mummified student.
yikes.
oh boy. Wow. Wow.
Oh,
Wow.
and Julian, since I've been, what are your thoughts on the whole Air Canada, strike and now resolved?
I have to say that obviously I'm a supporter of labor. I think labor rights. I think one of the reasons, at least in Canada, that young people can't afford housing is they have no negotiating power over their salaries, and people like me are never retiring. So, I mean,
Oh, right.
frankly, having more laws to stop strikes is not a good idea.
Jim wanted to enter the, go on, Jim. Got your hand up again?
Sorry about that. That was from earlier, I think.
The legacy hand bullshit. Um, yeah, I won't comment about Pacifico right now. Anyway, bunch of tyrannical shitheads. Um, all right, so yeah, we've exhausted. We got it. We covered a lot actually tonight. We you know
Does does um, does Ted does Ted
we dealt with Mamdani. We dealt with, oh yeah, I just want to mention Trump. You know what the whole history issue. You know, I saw what
Oh, the
really
Smithsonian.
motivating me on this whole revolution stuff because I saw that in the state of Oklahoma, they have a test there for the people who are taking history tests that if they answer that January 6th was not a goddamn insurrection, they don't get a job as a history professor or a history teacher in their public school system, which I consider to be complete bullshit. You know, really. I mean, like give me a break. So anyway, that's like a little cherry on top to end the day here. Anybody else? Kenny, you have any last concluding remarks? You got on mute. You got on mute,
All
Kenny.
right, all right, all right. Yeah. We got a little bit. It's not an argument. We got some expression coming here without getting very academic. When you read something, I discovered something on a particular object subject I don't want to bring up because it's a whole night's discussion. But just somebody because authorities come out and say, no, that's a hoax. That's a conspiracy theory. It's not true. Why? What's your evidence on that? Did you prove it? Do you have evidence that shows that the statement of the theory is invalid? No, we just said so. And I've got 150 scientists who say it's true or it's false or something.
Oh
But
yeah,
they
that's
don't come in with the evidence and show you where it is. They just make statements and they don't present the evidence of the other side.
you
So
got a 1 hour
here,
argument
yeah,
here.
so you can't just go to a reference or, Plato said this or somebody said that or Homer wrote a book or Mark Twain said something. You got to look at the facts and see
All right.
what's happening. And the one, oh no, yeah, I don't want to keep talking all night, but I really enjoyed the meeting tonight, which is a rarity because it wasn't just academic stuff talking about generals and tanks.
Yeah, I guess so. But anyway, yeah, it was fun. We can talk about the issue of quote expertise another time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think to be honest with you, I would probably if I was sitting here talking about issues of sending of something to orbit around Mars, I might ask Mr. McFadden to give me his expertise since he actually has something orbiting around Mars.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
So, is that not true, Jim? There's some experiment you have orbiting around Mars still?
Yeah, it's still there. They haven't shut us off. It looked like Trump was going to cut the program, but
Oh yeah.
it looks like
All right.
it's going to get extended for a couple more
Yeah, and
years.
so just as a little aperitif, I mean, like if we're talking about quote expertise, I mean, I agree with you that, people love to fall back on, well, like I don't do this. Like I understand all that. I agree with that. There is a certain uh healthy skepticism that people should have to any kind of authority of knowledge. On the other hand, I don't throw it out the door completely
Yeah.
because knowledge is knowledge.
Uh-huh.
I don't think you disagree with that.
No, no, knowledge presents itself in a fish in manifestation. Like in other words, if the keys are in the bath, you left the keys in the sink. You go, the keys are there, that's
Yeah.
valid. You know, when I think
Well-
you left them in the sink, it's just
Well,
hypothetical.
those are kind of the arguments when I used to go to the Ethical Cultural Society as a teenager. They used to sit there and discuss the dialogues of Plato, which sometimes I found ridiculous because all I was just looking at the pretty girls.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I wasn't necessarily, I mean, I thought it was cool to talk about Plato and all that, but my focus was on something more tangible. Yes,
I
Jim.
want to
I was
bring
gonna,
up
I was
something to
gonna,
tell everybody. This is an announcement. So Jim produced an interview with a guy named David Matthew
Graham. Graham.
Graham, scripted David Graham, and it
Lindsey
was like an hour
Graham's
plus. So
Lindsey
it's up
Graham's
there.
nephew. Lindsey
So
Graham's nephew.
Lindsey Graham's nephew. It's
Right.
very good, very didactic, and it's all about Project 2025.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there's an hour and a half thing, but there's shorts also that are 3 minutes long. And for some reason, the shorts are much more popular. So if you go to the GF Combine, excuse me, the GV Combine, or or in the GV Combine, you'll see links to it in the email that you got to invite you to this.
Right.
Watch it and send it to your friends or enemies. Promote the station.
Yeah, go on, Jim. What are you going to say?
It was a very good job. Jim does a fantastic job as an interviewer. He's a real journalist. Very good. He should be on. You should get on MSNBC before they go and change their name.
Nah. I was on the McNeil there. I was toilet trained a long time ago. Anyway, go on, Jim.
I was just going to say, since skepticism, of the news and stuff got mentioned, everybody ought to look up what the Gelman effect is. That's where you're reading the newspaper and it's about a subject have some expertise on it, and you read it and you just go, "This is garbage," and then you turn the page to the next one and you read something in that same newspaper and you think, "Wow, this is great." This is I didn't know about this, and you tend to believe all those
Right.
things written in the newspaper that you don't have any expertise on, but those ones that you do have expertise on, you can tell right away.
Oh
And
yeah.
so it's if you really want to be true to the truth, you really have to be skeptical about a lot of stuff, and find somebody you trust who actually has some expertise, in that subject if you don't have it. So that's the way I read stuff. If it doesn't sound quite like, well, that's pretty magical if that's true, I tend to try to do some research on it. So,
Well, then another clue is when you hear the same phrase repeated on each of the different stations, and they say the same thing, like weapons of mass destruction, weapons of mass destruction, weapons of mass destruction.
or if you hear the fact of the matter is,
Well,
Back to the
that's
matter.
the best that's the best one. You know that somebody's opinion is coming
well,
after
but see,
that.
that's where you get into this question of how do we receive the news these days? Because the news, like let's say 50 years ago, I probably would say the statistics probably show that most people got their news information from print or the major TV networks. That doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Now do I still? I haven't watched network news in a long time. I do read print sources all the time because but I'm a minority. And most people, one of the things, I'm glad you were turning me on to, Kenny, was that podcast world with Rogan. Now, Rogan, you'll sit there and you watch these guys defer to Rogan. You watch the people on MSNBC, they'll say, my God, 75 million people watched him. And then I watched him with Bernie. And, he sort of was supporting Bernie. Then they got into the COVID stuff. And then that's where, of course, Bernie doesn't agree with Joe. But it's amazing, and then how do you validate this? How do you validate this knowledge as being true? Because this is one of the things I find particularly pernicious in the attacks on the universities. Now, do I think that because somebody is a professor at Harvard, that gives them some anointed power that they know everything about everybody? Of course not. And I have plenty of friends of mine who teach at Harvard, and they are the first ones who admit that they're not the vaunted truth of anything. Uh, and the same thing goes with friends of mine who teach at Columbia. I mean, all these places. However, and I'd say most scholars are like that. Some scholars are not, but most are. But then, of course, when you have the idea of the very idea of expert knowledge being denigrated into, oh, who cares? It's just other opinion. Well, that's where I sort of have to draw the line. That's why I have to draw the line. There is something to be said for, someone who has, through their productivity, their work, acquired and mastered and interpreted and synthesized lots of knowledge, and produced books and produced work and papers. I mean, I respect that. Does that mean I think that that person's word is sacrosanct? No, because then you have to get into questions about their overall, uh, theoretical framework, how they organize that knowledge. But on the other hand, I sort of, you will have less tendency to have factual disagreements about things because certainly they would agree on certain things that are factually accurate. Whereas if you're talking to somebody, let's say if I go into these chat machines and fight it out with the Fox trolls or troll the Fox people, it's opinion. It's opinion, and they feel that 100%. Do I say that, like some of their racist comments, you know, I have no problems just saying that, like you're just into some xenophobic racism. That's my opinion. Does that and frankly, I think I'm objectively right. But they probably think they'll call me a libtard. They'll call me all sorts of different names, which do amuse me. Being called a libtard is a new one for me. That does entertain me because then I, of course, can have the opportunity to call them retardos. But anyway, the issue of what is knowledge? How do you organize and synthesize and receive knowledge? And what is the hierarchy of what is quote truth? Well, everybody's been fighting about that for years, for decades, for centuries. There's nothing new about that, but I don't want to open up a whole can of worms. We're here for another goddamn hour.
But we have to ask more important questions. Like Ken, when are you gonna join us in New York again?
You're right. Jim wanted to jump in with something. Jim, you want to jump in with something?
I didn't repeat the question, Alex.
When you come into our fair city?
Oh, I can't make it until maybe October, November. Medical. Got to stay here where the medicals,
the doctors
down the street. That doctor's down the street. Yeah. So that's okay. It's not a major thing, but got to do it.
All right. Yeah, Jim.
Anyhow, that's my cover story. The truth is, it's too goddamn hot there.
No, it was nice today. It was 68 degrees, man. It was nice. Yeah, we don't have normal summers anymore.
Yeah.
Global warming has shattered that.
Yeah.
Jim, you were going to say something?
At the diner tomorrow.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, Emma, it's great to see you again. I haven't seen you in a while, man.
Yeah,
Nice
it's good to be
Hello
back.
to Theodore Cook is with us too.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
Ted
you.
joined us. So when the hell did Ted join?
Jim? He's been there for
Jesus
like
Christ.
half an hour.
Oh, I didn't know
Apparently
that.
I missed one hell of a discussion about truth, and I just
Well,
came
we
in
were
after
just
it,
starting to
but,
open that up.
That was nice. It was nice to hear the end of it. Yeah, I'm here. Just
Well, I mean, look at like, well, Ted. I mean, I'm glad Ted's here. I mean, the question of like, opinionated comments about Japan. I mean, how do you, because it was funny. I've been watching these Japanese cook shows.
Yeah.
And I've been amazed. I've been watching these ramen shows about how they cook ramen, which is what a mind blower that is.
well, that's another
And
story.
really amazing. I mean, these guys are just so well organized and, ugh. But, the question of stereotypical views about other people outside of our own culture.
Yeah, but 60 Minutes just did it special on the low fertility rate down
Yeah,
to
it was
1.4. It's pretty good.
In Japan.
yeah on Japan. It was very short. I saw the very end of it. I missed the first minute or two, but it was quite interesting. Yeah.
It was a good
Well-
presentation.
Yeah.
Well,
So
but,
you're willing to go
I mean,
back there and help them?
it's nothing new if you follow Japan. But
I know, but
it's
you're
good
willing to go
know.
back there and help the ladies, arrive with some, become mothers?
No, but the important thing, I think the most important thing in that program, from my perspective, was that the newly elected member of parliament, upper house, returned to her. She was elected mainly because she made an argument about women's, about birth and birth rights, but she returned to her hometown,
Right.
up in Aomori, and decided that she was going to try to get jobs back there. The problem is, this is what the Japanese people have done for the last 35 years, trying to start make life in the countryside worth living in, and move out of Tokyo. The trouble is, everyone's moving out of the countryside, and the old people are dying. So you've got villages. I have some of the villages I did research in. They literally have whole hamlets. The old buraku, the term buraku, the hamlet, with 7 or 8 houses with nobody in them.
Wow.
Yeah,
They
I've
don't,
seen.
they don't sell them because the land is too valuable to sell, but nobody's buying either, and no one wants to live there. So it's really a critical problem. So what you got is Japanese television is full of programs about some foreigner marries a Japanese. They could be a male or female, either way, and then they end up living in the countryside, and they restore an inn, and it's a beautiful new inn, and they have a nice program about that. But those are attempting to create tourist attractions out of anime, because an author once worked there, or one of the characters is mentioned in one of the animes. It's been the latest technique, and there are anime museums all over the country, or anime manga museums dedicated to Japanese popular culture. But how many of them will be here 5 years from now? I really don't expect them to last. Yeah.
What did you
I've
say?
seen
That's
a
what you did.
couple.
That's how you got yourself a train station.
I've seen a couple of
Shinkansen and all the
YouTube.
new ones that followed on, the bullet trains afterwards. You had to have something to attract people to it. But except for Disneyland, very few of them have really succeeded. I guess a huge Harry Potter's village is apparently packed with people in Japan, outside Tokyo.
Yeah, I've
What,
seen.
what were you gonna say, Mo? Go on.
I've seen some YouTube videos on that, like where somebody, independent people that go and whatever. Anyway, they were doing a story on how the husband and wife moved back to the wife's
Yeah,
rural village or whatever, and the village was very small, but it had had the old school or whatever. And what
Yeah.
they did was they put money into and the school was fine structurally, but they gave him like really good buku tax, like to rent like a classroom as his business or whatever. He's like some kind of a special coffee roaster or whatever. Anyway, he was talking about like how much it cost them, and like it was like nothing. Like they pay him
No,
to
that's
stick
true.
around there essentially. But it was just very fascinating.
I have one person I knew who's ended up. He's now actually working in the his part-time business how I met him was through tour guiding. He does the tour guiding for various groups that come through. But he as an American has lived in Japan for 20 years. His wife is Japanese, but he lived in Tokyo for a while. But then they finally moved back to the countryside, and he's restoring Japanese traditional agricultural techniques in his village. And they moved to the village, and they had marvelous stuff. He's been dealing about natural hillside maintenance, how it was before World War II, before they cut all the trees down and everything came. They went back to pre 1930s agricultural techniques, and he's made a living doing this, raising crops the old-fashioned way, moving things away from the roads so that the trees don't come down on the road, and all kinds of things like that. But he and his wife finally had a child. They've had 2 children now, but their first child was the first person born in that village, like that program that we saw the other night. Was the first person born in that village for years, maybe 5, 6, 7 years. And he pointed out that his wife, neither he nor his wife are considered members of the village, but the child is. He's real. He was born there. That kind of tradition is very strong. It's a very interesting technique. It's a real problem, but it is true that rural Japan, the problem there is you can't really buy it. And this is, of course, the great flaw someone like myself faced. You can't really buy land in Japan or own land in Japan because you don't have the right to live in Japan. And that's, people have to realize that you just don't go to Japan and live there unless there's something similar to the $5 million. Donald Keene was allowed, for example, to go from Colombia to go to Japan to retire and die as a great Japanese literature expert. But most people don't have that right to become Japanese or to own property like that, to buy property. You can rent property, you can use other people's property, and if your wife is Japanese or husband is Japanese and reverse, then you can own property. But if you're not, in my case, I lost my wife 4 years ago, and I have no right to residence in Japan. and there's no way to get it. You get a tourist visa like anybody else,
Mm.
and even though I have family and relatives in Japan. Yeah, so that's a distinction.
Jim, did you want to say
It's
something?
certainly a problem of labor shortage. Like, how are they going to get people to live in Japan if they don't give them the right to be there? We know this problem.
All right. Let me just say something. I think Jim had raised his hand, but
Yeah, I was just going to throw in one. I threw it into the chat. I was going to recommend the China Mirage, which gives an interesting run up from the Opium Wars
All
up
right.
through World War II and misunderstandings of China and the corruption of Chiang Kai-shek and the Sun syndicate. So it's worth a good read. A lot of information and history in that.
The China Mirage. Okay. And
Thank
then
you, Jim.
before I was going to bring in with Julian, I was just to say, look, one thing that someone said about 2 weeks ago, and Julie, who's not here tonight, she mentioned, was the issue of deportation, which again is a whole other can of worms. But I personally view these things as totally disgusting. I think I've known people who have been here, who raised families here, finally got their citizenship after maybe 15, 20 years. And I've been watching, I was watching videos today. Someone from New York One, the Spectrum channel, went down to Federal Plaza, 26 Federal Plaza, and just sat there and was filming all these people coming in for their appearances under the 1996 laws or the laws that exist in terms of immigration. They're coming in to do their regular checks, and they're getting arrested and deported. And I really find that I find that un-American, frankly. I don't have any sympathy for people who are members of, you know, MS-13. I mean, somebody like that I could give a shit about. But, the average person being arrested is not in that category. And these are just working people. And I just find it, reprehensible. And I just don't know if Trump decides to come into New York and, do this on some grand industrialized scale. I don't think that's going to go over too well with the population here in New York City. I think people are not, it's not going to be, people aren't going to like it.
I agree with Aaron Reyes on that. I don't know if you've talked to him about it, but
Now,
he
what does Aaron
thinks that
think?
he thinks that it's absolutely impossible to do it like that in New York City just because of the density and the way that they were trying to do it or the way that they were doing it, executing it in LA
Oh, yeah.
would not work at all in New York. And I tend to agree with that, I think.
Well, they need a lot of, I mean, look at the amount of MPs they've sent into Washington. I mean, what, 3 or 4,000 a couple of thousand National Guardsmen? And then, you have all these federalized, all these FBI agents, and, it's just, you'd need a couple, what, 20 or 30,000 troops, my God, in a city like New York. I mean, forget about it. It's just crazy to think about this. But yeah, go on, Julian.
Yeah, no, I was just offering at the tail end of this if I could do like a 4-minute presentation.
You want to do it now?
It sounds insane, yeah, but I just wrote it.
Oh, fuck. All right, go on, man.
All right, you got to let me share.
Kenny, you got to let him share.
All right, so do you guys see something?
Oh, you want to talk about warfare? Okay, go on.
No, I promise. So I just wrote it this morning. It's a
See it.
you guys just hear the numbers. It'll be over super fast. It's a part of my strategic studies lecture. I took a book and put a bunch of numbers up. So this is from U.S. Army losses, World War II. There were a total 949,000 casualties, of which 175,000 were KIA, 599,000 were WIA, 14,900 amputees. I give the standard definition of KIA and WIA for my students.
That's not what's on the screen.
No, hang on. Jesus, Murphy, let me share this again. Stop share.
Right.
Share. All right, I'm gonna go.
It was there. I don't know.
I was looking at it myself.
Somebody was looking at the wrong screen.
Okay.
Is it there now?
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah.
Okay, so the ratio of 3.4 wounded in action for every KIA has been consistent since 1750. So it's thought it has to do with the balance of artillery and the type of munitions they have, and the type of shot being fired. So, how do I go to the next page? Hang on. Right. This is the source. Battle casualties.
That we're using is from battle.
Whoop, I got, sorry, let me just pause this thing because it just choked. So this is
the whole
the book I
page.
got it from. It's actually a book done by medical people to figure out how many surgeons you need in a core level attack. So the whole book builds up to that section at the end. Believe it or not, you need less than 100 surgeons for a high intensity battle involving 50,000 Americans. And it's totally unbelievable, but they've got the math to show it. So this is
used in this particular slide.
yeah, let me just pause this thing. So this is the case study, the Third Army in Europe, 44 to 45. Of those killed, 58.4% were killed by artillery, 30% by bullets. Of those wounded, 85% by artillery and mines, 15% by wounded. Now, this is the crazy statistic. For those people that are shot outright, 38% were shot in the head. In other words, don't look up, right? If someone's shooting, get your buddy to look around the corner. All right. So people, I mean, it's a colossal statistic about people's vulnerability, and I'm not sure if there's a technical solution. If you get shot in the head and neck and you're not killed right away, you have, and people can basically get you to an aid station. Your mortality increases by 30%. The worst is the abdomen. If you get shot in the chest, you can survive. You get shot in the stomach, other than the spleen and the liver, it's difficult to repair the stomach. So don't get shot in the stomach, get shot in the chest. 93,000 U.S. servicemen.
Effects of medical treatment.
Let me get this. Thing keeps pausing. Sorry, let me go back. Hang on. Sorry, I'm trying to not have my voice because I've already got the thing in the background. There we go. 93,000 U.S. servicemen were killed in action. Only 4.2% of the 625,700 WIA died after receiving medical treatment. In other words, if they could get you to an aid station, you had a 95% survival rate. That's World War II. That's all theaters for the U.S. Army. And that's an incredible statistic, right? It means that, war's almost like an industrial process where if you can get the people to the surgeons, they overwhelmingly survive. Now, they might be amputees. They might have other issues. Now, 194,000
deaths
bloody
in
hell.
World War II for the U.S. military accounted for lots of.
Right. So 194,000 were evacuated to hospitals for approximately 100 days of convalescence. So that 68% returned to their units for duty. If you work out the total lost man days from sort of compounding wounded in action, return to combat, a KIA is total loss is 76 million man days, where wounded was only 2.5. The implication is, you might have seen in Hollywood where you're supposed to wound a guy. If you don't kill a guy, he's going to come back 4 or 5 times. Now, there's a whole, of course, math, Cox regression, where you have censored and non-censored data to figure out what the optimal time to keep someone in a hospital is. But I mean, this is a sort of a surprising statistic. The point on the previous slide was that neuropsychiatric, how do I pause this? Neuropsychiatric injuries match WIA almost perfectly. It means that people suffer from PTSD probably from seeing other people get injured in combat. And if you look, I mean, you look at the charts here, obviously the Southwest Pacific, it didn't follow it. Perhaps it's because of, the sharp, short actions on a beach as opposed to continuous combat. The authors don't speculate much about it. And so this is a surprising one. Here we go. Oh, bloody hell. Hang on. I mean, there we go. Right. So disease killed far less in World War II than historically because of antibiotics from 1941 on. But if you look at hospital admissions, 79% were for disease, 13% for non-combat injury, and only 8% for combat. And you can compare, obviously, disease deaths. I mean, 65% of deaths in the Union Army was from disease. WW1 was 48%. World War II is only 4.9%. However, obviously, if disease, you're only going to lose 16 days per admission. Work injuries 29. Battle wounded is 101. This is a list of diseases, and this is.
The Second World War was a mechanized conflict.
Right. So this is my last slide, which I found really interesting. Because World War II is so mechanized, you had a crap load of on-the-job injuries from mechanical objects. So there were 65,000 non-combat deaths, including a whole bunch of aircraft accidents. Now, this is the U.S. Army Air Force. So these are, people playing with fuel, walking into propellers, dropping stuff on themselves. 22,000 other accidents. Only 14,000 Americans died of disease in World War II in the US Army. Like a crazy low figure. But again, you walk into any hospital, most of the people there will be there for disease, not combat. And then you've got your homicides, executions, drownings, and suicides. This is me taking information out of that book that's 300 pages long. I strongly recommend reading it. I just thought you might find these statistics very curious.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
That's good. Okay, good.
Yeah, thanks, man. All right, Julian, we
Cheers.
can talk another time. Thank you.
All right, guys.
All right,
Okay.
take it easy.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you, Julian.
Thank you, Ted.
Adios, amigos. See you next week, hopefully.